If you don't know Kinnikuman by name, you may know it for Mattel's muscle toys in the 80s, Ultimate Muscle in the 2000s, or the many media franchises that were inspired by the series and or reference it. Today on English Version Files, we're putting the spotlight on this legendary, influential wrestling manga franchise, including the toy line that took on a life of its own, the original anime that was denied a dub twice and took over 40 years to be fully subbed, the English dub by 4Kids of the sequel that was so popular that more episodes were commissioned, the recent anime available on Netflix, and so much more. But first, let me know in the comments who your favorite Kinnikuman character is and why, even if you only know them from muscle toys. Mine is easily Terry Man, the badass American stereotype that has a great friendship with Kinnikuman. You know the story of Captain Underpants with George and Harold wanting to make their own goofy parody of superheroes like Superman? Kinnikuman's creation is just like that, but in real life. The series being the idea of longtime friends fresh out of high school Yoshinori Nakai and Takashi Shimada, collectively known as Yude Tamago. The duo wanted to make a superhero parodying Ultraman, and the two got their wish as this pig-nosed pro-tag debuted in Weekly Shonen Jump starting May 28, 1979. Add in a healthy dose of potty humor, and so far it's like Captain Underpants. Except imagine if Captain Underpants got super freaking violent too!
As God is my witness, he is broken in half!
The manga follows the adventures of the cowardly, concupiscent wrestler superhero with a love of gyudon, Suguru Kinniku, better known as Kinnikuman, which translates to Muscle Man.
My mom!
No, not that one. Kinnikuman is a Chojin, or superhuman, who was the lost heir apparent to an alien planet called, what else? Planet Kinniku. The first two volumes feel like a silly good time with Kinnikuman battling kaiju and being an ultra doofus, but the manga really hit its stride with the 20th Chojin Olympics. From there, the story quickly evolved from an Ultraman parody to an action-packed wrestling story with character designs so stereotypical they'd make even Punch-Out blush. Kinnikuman would prove to be an incredibly popular and influential action shonen manga. While not the first wrestling manga on the market, Kinnikuman was one of the first, if not the first, to establish many tropes still used today. 4 years after its debut, the series would get its very own TV anime, skipping content here and there, changing around events, and toning down the extreme violence. Not that this scene is much better than a guy getting ripped in half, but still. As many series tend to do, Japan's favorite muscle-bound Chojin also got a bevy of character goods, among them being these little guys, Kinkeshi, a term combining Kinniku with eraser. The many creative designs of Kinnikuman's cast of characters were molded into figures with flexible eraser-like material and released by Bandai in 1983. There were hundreds of these colorful Kinkeshi for Japanese kids to collect. See, in Japan, many of Kinnikuman's zany-looking dudes were designed by readers and submitted into contests to be chosen as Canon Chojin. Given Shonen Jump is targeted at a younger demographic, in a way, this made Kinnikuman's cast feel like the series was designed in part by kids, for kids. No, we're not quite there yet. This collectible toy craze would make its way to American shores thanks to toy company Mattel. What's known about the back end of developing an American version of Kinnikuman is comprised greatly of interviews by University of Muscle owner Chad Perry with former Mattel product designer Martin Adiola, the late former executive vice president of marketing Joe Morrison, and an anonymous toy insider who went by Jan09 for their interview. According to former Mattel public relations manager Candace Irving, an American version of Kinnikuman was conceived in a company R&D think tank, the birthplace of other toy lines they've made like Hot Wheels and Popples. Martin Adiola stated that the VP of design at Mattel had employees sent over to Japan for a month to brainstorm, and that's how Kinnikuman came up. And per Jan09, Mattel wanted their own import toy line like Hasbro had with Transformers. Mattel also wanted something that was cheap. And what do you know, Kinkeshi fit the mold perfectly. The series would not be known to American kids as Kinnikuman, but instead M.U.S.C.L.E, which stands for Millions of Unusual Small Creatures Lurking Everywhere. Mattel filed a trademark for the wrestling franchise on August 5th, 1985, with a first use anywhere date of July 19th. Mattel also filed trademarks that same day for many other terms and additional toys that would be made for the line. Mattel licensed the product while Bandai Japan manufactured the product. While there is no known solid launch date for this toy line stateside, the earliest hint I could find of Mattel's soon-to-be hit was in a newspaper article on October 9th, 1985, of the American toy giant discussing new products at a Ventana Canyon, Arizona toy show. Amongst mentions of upcoming toy categories was this, quote, "A boys' line of miniature figures that is both inexpensive and collectible. At about 35 cents a piece, Mattel CEO Tom Kalinske thinks they will be treated like baseball cards," unquote. And yes, this is the same Tom Kalinske that would become CEO of Sega of America in 1990. This description and time period match up with M.U.S.C.L.E, as reportedly the toy line was hitting shelves in late 1985. Newspapers started advertising M.U.S.C.L.E in late January of 1986, and the toy line would be accompanied by an amusing TV ad campaign by advertising agency Ogilvy and Mather, known today as simply Ogilvy. The ads are reminiscent of old newsreels and cheesy B-movies.
They're ugly, they're weird, they're tiny, they're terrible, and they're pink!
That's right, this boys' toy would launch in pink! This color is also known as bubblegum or flesh, the latter being a term that's falling out of usage in recent times. Instead of the eraser-like material used for its Japanese counterpart, American M.U.S.C.L.E toys have the same molds with a more plastic-like material, making them much firmer while still having some bendability for wrestling action. One thing missing from these toys in the year of our Lord 2025 is the smell. I'm way too young to know how M.U.S.C.L.E toys smelled when they were new, but I've had the smell described to me as pungent and, quote, akin to a sweet car floor mat smell crossed with a hint of Play-Doh, unquote. Nowadays, the toys don't really have a smell. I guess that's what 40 years does to a toy. Of the 418 King Keshi toys, 233 molds made the move to M.U.S.C.L.E, with an asterisk as there's more to this number than meets the eye, and we'll explore this as we go. But ads claimed there were 233 figures to collect. There was even a mail-in offer for a poster listing all the figures to collect. These little collectibles were sold in random blister packs of 4 with a transparent cover so kids could see what they're getting, and in translucent collector can or garbage can packs of 10. There were also 4 big packs of 28 figures not available in the random packs. Strangely, Kinnikuman is missing his forehead symbol on these sets depending on the print run. These imports were not the first toys of their kind. Before even M.U.S.C.L.E, there was Monster Toss, later known as Canfull of Monsters, released by Bandai America circa 1979. Same concept. Little weird dudes kids could collect that came in a garbage can. Looking closely, the garbage can is even nigh identical to M.U.S.C.L's other than the Canfull version being a solid color. And wouldn't you know it, these monsters in a can were originally Keshi of Kaiju from Ultraman. Yeah, Kinnikuman's connections to Ultraman go deeper than spoofery. And this isn't the only time the famed Tokusatsu series will come up in this video. The year before M.U.S.C.L.E, there was also a toy with the same concept as King Keshi and Monster Toss called Musclemania, made by Select Merchandise in New York. It is unknown how much this toy line connects to the story of Kinnikuman and M.U.S.C.L.E. Some of these Musclemania toys are super stretchy though. M.U.S.C.L.E would not launch with the original Kinnikuman canon intact. Instead, the toys received a wholly original plotline courtesy of the TV ads and the back of the toy packaging, with the 28-pack box giving the quote-unquote full story. Beastly little brawlers suddenly manifested out of nowhere and were invading the streets. These little bad boys began swearing allegiance to one of 2 sides: the Thug Busters led by Kinnikuman, now called Muscle Man, or the Cosmic Crunchers led by Buffalo Man, now called Terry Bull. The 2 legions were locked in endless combat through wrestling matches. This basic foundation let kids' imaginations run wild to come up with names and stories for these guys. Mattel released 2 other M.U.S.C.L.E toys around the same time, the first being the M.U.S.C.L.E Battlin belt, a kid-sized wrestling championship belt that was also a carrying case for up to 10 M.U.S.C.L figures and a mini ring in the center buckle. Second of the initial lineup of offerings in early 1986 was the hard Knockin Rockin Ring Wrestling Arena playset, say that 5 times fast. The ring came with figures of Muscle Man and Terry Bull that are unique to the American market, which makes the number of M.U.S.C.L toys to collect 235. Remember I said there was an asterisk, and these 2 bonus guys are only the tip of the iceberg. Anyways, unlike the Battlin belt, The hard Knockin ring was based on a Japanese Kinnikuman product, which is why the decals on the ring featured Japanese illustrations instead of the goofier looking American ones. In the Japanese version of this playset, characters were held at their feet, if they had any. In the US version, the pink guys were held at the abdomen, or whatever their midsection may be, and each player jiggles a joystick to knock out the opposing muscle guy. The thing is, these plastic holders are flimsy, so it's not rare to see these toys with broken holders in online listings. Mine here seems to be in kinda sketchy shape. The box shows completely different holders that look like they could take a lot more than an afternoon of aggressive 8-year-olds wanting to see the two toy wrestlers beat the snot out of each other, or 15 minutes of a grown adult trying to get footage for a YouTube video. There is also a disclaimer on the box that reads, "Not for use with some muscle figures." And sure enough, some muscle figures are too chonky or oblong to fit in the plastic holders. With all these products out around the same time, how did these toys fare with Americans? Very, very well. Come April, Playthings magazine reported M.U.S.C.L.E appeared to be Mattel's best-selling property in 1986, overtaking even sales of Mattel's other muscle-bound toy line, Masters of the Universe. Granted, by this point, the tie-in cartoon for Masters of the Universe had run its course. But still, taking over sales of He-Man and Company is nothing to sneeze at. A toy seller in Chicago that spoke to Playthings magazine stated, and I quote, "M.U.S.C.L.E toys really are stupid, but they sell," unquote. Los Angeles toy expert Joanne Gamlin reported to the magazine that two retailers before the American International Toy Fair stated Mattel was a quote-unquote big winner with its 1986 toy lineup, which included M.U.S.C.L.E as a quote-unquote home run hitter. And M.U.S.C.L.E even landed in the top 10 toys on Toy and Hobby World magazine's survey charts. There was a lot of interest in these little guys from kids and toy professionals alike, and this continued throughout the year. Anecdotal statements from many a kid at the time say the wacky designs, collectability, and low price point were appealing, plus the popularity of pro wrestling in the 80s. What was appealing to children too was the lack of a preconceived story. M.U.S.C.L.E was not tied to a cartoon or comic book as far as American children knew, and barring Muscle Man and Terry Bull, the sky was the limit as to what the story or characters could be. Because of the lack of names and backstories, children of the day would give them names like Toothpaste Dude, Rubik Dude, and Samson. But there was one toy among the bunch that captured the imagination of 80s kids like no other. Amidst all these weird guys was what appeared to be a claw with a face. This is Sneegator's true form, and seemed to captivate every 80s kid that was into muscle. To this day, the claw is one of the most iconic and sought-after muscle toys, practically being a poster child for the collecting scene. It wasn't until this boom in popularity that Takashi Shimada of Yude Tamago was made aware of this American version of his co-creation. Shimada received a muscle toy as a souvenir from Hawaii from mangaka Osamu Akimoto of Kochikame fame. Now over in Hawaii, these products were being listed in some newspapers as Kinnikuman, as there is a strong Japanese presence in Hawaiian media like broadcast TV. But otherwise, these toys were muscle through and through. Given Shimada was surprised to receive this gift, it should come as no surprise he was not involved with this toy line. Sometime after though, he became somewhat involved in one aspect of Kinnikuman's American counterpart, the anime. With muscle toys being so hot with Americans, it would seem like having a tie-in cartoon on American TV would be a no-brainer. Thanks to the Reagan administration in the early 80s deregulating the FCC's rules for the kids' TV market, animation studios and toy companies teamed up and made cartoons that were effectively 22-minute toy commercials. M.U.S.C.L.E already had an animated series, just in a different language, so it'd be in Mattel's interest to run a localized version of the show on TV, right? Well, there were plans to release an English dub of the Kinnikuman anime in the US, but the toys were selling so well without an accompanying cartoon, putting time and money in localizing this show wasn't seen as a worthwhile investment. Even if this dub was greenlit, the show would have had several hurdles to jump. For one, the toy packaging and advertisements changed the canon, so a theoretical dub would have had to rewrite the story to match the new canon. Buffalo Man, or Terry Bull, is the main antagonist of M.U.S.C.L.E but doesn't appear in the show until episode 48, and he ends up becoming Kinnikuman's friend in the end, so all of that would have been a problem too. Plus, there was the excessive violence, which, while toned down in the anime, is still pretty damn brutal. And there would be all sorts of alterations needed to explain the fact they're all canonically toy-sized, and the whole teams aspect, the list goes on. But alright, I've avoided talking about it long enough. Remember when I said many character designs in Kinnikuman were stereotypical? Yeah, there were plenty of designs that are problematic, but would probably fly back in the 80s. And to be fair, Japan got a lot of their stereotypes from imported media. Not that it excuses anything, but it's an observation. But there are two World War II related elephants in the room. This is Rockin Man, a West German Chojin with theming who does a certain salute involving extending one's arm and has a special attack of breathing fumes. You can probably guess what those fumes are and what the move is referencing. Yeah, I know he denounces Mustache Man in the afterlife as seen in Deep of Muscle episode 13, but Rockin Man is regardless decked out in symbols affiliated with Now, this isn't just a guy that can be skipped, as his son, Rockin Jr., who mind you also sports imagery, eventually becomes one of Kinnikuman's allies. Japanese audiences may not have minded all this back in the 80s, but Rockin Man is what got the show pulled from airwaves in France. In the end, even if the toys weren't selling like hotcakes and plans went through on airing the anime on American TV, there would have been a hell of a lot of work to do to make this show fit the M.U.S.C.L.E brand. Lack of a TV show be damned, M.U.S.C.L.E continued trending in the American market. M.U.S.C.L.E stayed in the top 10 best-selling toys in the Toy and Hobby World surveys through July. The toys would also receive shelf space in the UK, Spain, and Canada. Just like any good successful toy line, M.U.S.C.L.E fell victim to cheap copycats and bootlegs. One of the most amusing of these bootlegs is a line known as Alien Wrestler, the legally distinct but not really version of M.U.S.C.L.E. We'll have more bootlegs to discuss later. Given this was a Japanese property and not entirely Mattel's IP, there were limited ways to keep the brand fresh. That said, to keep the toys quote-unquote fresh, M.U.S.C.L.E figures received waves of color variations. While pink is the iconic color of the toy line, a second wave of figures had the brawlers in classic pink as well as dark blue, red, and purple. A third wave later on would see no pink but instead dark blue, red, purple, magenta, orange, or salmon, neon green, neon orange, and light blue. These flashy new colors were also shown in a commercial, which also had figures exclusive to the ad. The lore in this stuff runs really deep, y'all. In addition to this, Mattel partnered up with Nestle to put one free M.U.S.C.L.E figure inside specially marked cans of Quick, now Nesquik. For new products, mid-October 1986 saw the release of a M.U.S.C.L.E board game, the M.U.S.C.L.E Mega Match Game. The box came with 5 light purple or grape Thugbuster figures and 5 neon green Cosmic Cruncher figures. The game also provided players with press-on labels, stickers to customize M.U.S.C.L.E toys. The game instructions even suggest using them as medals. The game is simple for kids to figure out. Set up a team of M.U.S.C.L.E dudes on the board and use a spinner to move and determine victors in M.U.S.C.L.E bouts. Or if you only have the pink figures, you can use your imagination like I did. That same month, there was another M.U.S.C.L.E game, this one being a video game. The Nintendo Entertainment System was on the rise stateside, and luckily for Mattel, Kinnikuman already had a game released in 1985 on the Famicom, the Japanese counterpart to the NES. Kinnikuman M.U.S.C.L.E Tag Match was rebranded as Tag Team Match M.U.S.C.L.E for the American market. And as a quick heads up for any viewers out there that are photosensitive, this game has a lot of flashing lights I can't get around. So if you'd like, feel free to skip ahead to the timestamp listed here for a wrap-up. Otherwise, watch on to hear about this 8-bit Kinnikuman title. The American version of this game had a few alterations. Firstly, the game's title screen was changed to have the M.U.S.C.L.E branding and copyright info. Secondly, the Famicom game features 8-bitified excerpts of the second anime opening Blazing Kinnikuman for the title screen, match over, and game over themes. This would have caused licensing issues for the American side, so the NES game received new compositions entirely. Lastly, the American game replaced an entire character. One of the 8 playable fighters in the Famicom game was the controversial German himself, Rockin Jr. So the American version replaced him with the Native American character Geronimo, and the Fume special move was replaced with the Tomahawk move. Speaking of 8 playable fighters, the instruction manual gives names to these muscle guys, further expanding the canon of the toys. Kinnikuman was called Muscle Man, just like the American canon, although with a space. Robin Mask, Geronimo, Terry Man, Warsman, and even Buffalo Man kept their names, so no Terry Bull in this game. Ashura Man's name was romanized as Ashra Man, and Ramen Man's name was romanized as, Larman Man. Each wrestler also had their special techniques listed, with most of them being similar, if not the exact same as their Japanese counterparts, with one exception other than obviously Geronimo's Fumeless special. Ramen Man's Killer Karate became Fatal Kung Fu. Lastly, Kinnikuman's trainer M.U.S.C.L.E. Alexandria appears in the game, tossing power-ups into the ring for players to collect. Poor Meat went unnamed in the instruction manual, simply being referred to as Trainer. As for the game itself, it's a pretty simple wrestling game that even predates pro wrestling on the NES. You know, the infamous A Winner Is You game. Players choose their wrestlers and enter the ring attacking with punches, rope pushes, suplexes, and so forth. There are also options for an ice ring with a slippery mat and an electrified ring with ropes that will shock any wrestler that touches them. I'm showing stills because the flashing lights are painful to look at, like your eyes are being electrocuted. There's a single-player mode which on paper has no real ending, but ends at 255 matches if one is skilled/lucky enough to reach that point. And there is a multiplayer mode for 2 players to go head-to-head. However, this game has aged. What was likely fine for kids in 1986 is viewed as bad now by reviewers and fans. The gameplay is janky, the visuals are primitive even by early NES standards, and the game lacks a soundtrack beyond jingles. Matches take place without background music, with only the 8-bit beeps and boops of tag team smackdowns filling the silence. To be fair though, this is like comparing later Street Fighter games to Street Fighter 1, which is far more primitive than its sequels. In summary, Tag Team Match Muscle is a neat part of the Muscle product lineup and adds some names to faces, but with its lackluster gameplay, visuals, and sound design, time has not been kind to this title. Moving from digitized wrestlers back to the physical toys, when the end of the year rolled around, Muscle proved its might by being on lists of top-selling toys of 1986. According to Joe Morrison, the TV commercials for the line were the most successful for Mattel that year. However, December 1986 would be the last hurrah for Muscle's initial run. Even though the line cracked the top list for toys for the year, Muscle had disappeared from the top 10 best-selling toys on Toy and Hobby World's list in October, never to return. There were no new Muscle products, although there was a prototype of a Hot Wheels muscle hauler made that never entered mass production. Joe Morrison stated that had the series done better, the rest of the original Keshi figures would have become Muscle toys too, although I personally doubt the Brockens would have gone over well. Soon after Muscle was knocked out of the top 10, Mattel introduced a related toy line called C.U.T.I.E, which stands for Coolest Ultra Tiny Individuals on Earth. C.U.T.I.E is to Muscle what Princess of Power is to Masters of the Universe, the girl version of the brand. Instead of chibi wrestlers with exaggerated limbs and other non-wrestling characters in the series like one of the commentators, C.U.T.I.E had figures that, according to Mattel, quote, love to do what girls can do and go everywhere girls go, unquote. Much like Muscle, there were random packs of 4 with a transparent front, but C.U.T.I.E also had themed 10 packs. No garbage cans for these girls. There were no 28 packs at all. Mattel didn't manufacture nearly as many C.U.T.I.E figures as the 200 plus Muscle had, especially with the front of the 4-pack reading, collect dozens and dozens. Muscle and C.U.T.I.E toys were often advertised together in newspaper ads and often ran for the same price. There were no TV spots or anything too fancy for these toys. They didn't really catch on like Muscle did in 1986, and there's no real collector's market for them. As the months went on, retailers were putting Muscle and C.U.T.I.E toys at steep discounts trying to get rid of their stock. Eventually, Muscle disappeared from listings entirely, and all of Mattel's trademarks related to the series expired in late 1992. So, what happened? Why was M.U.S.C.L.E just a flash-in-the-pan fad? There is no single concrete answer, but rather a myriad of factors colliding. M.U.S.C.L E was already fighting an uphill battle and wrestling with the difficulties of having no tie-in comic books, cartoons, and so forth, which is a factor Joe Morrison agrees led to M.U.S.C.L E's demise. Sure, Mattel could have resumed talks with the Japanese side on bringing the anime to American shores, but that's not the full picture. 1987 was a tough year for the toy industry. Toy sales were down across the board, and many once popular action figure lines either saw their end or a significant drop in sales that year. Given the state of the industry, Mattel was struggling to stay afloat. Come June 1987, their situation became so bad that they began laying off employees, letting go of 10% of their headquarters staff. In December, Mattel reported a loss of $12.4 million for the fiscal year to that point. Yikes. The only Mattel toy lines doing well were the Evergreen, or Everpink I guess, Barbie, and the Captain Power interactive computer television game. Investing in video games, or I guess video game adjacent things, was a smart business move given the rebound of the home video game console market from the infamous 1983 slump and subsequent dominance in kids' entertainment, especially the NES. Many toy manufacturers were praying for Nintendo's demise, but Joe Morrison felt video games were not a factor in M.U.S.C.L being axed. Even if the toy industry wasn't having a rough year, 1987 also saw the end of the Kinnikuman manga's original run. After about 8 years of publication in Shonen Jump, Yude Tamago decided to end their hit wrestling manga, its last chapter being printed on May 4th, 1987. And Shimada cited a few reasons for the duo's decision to end the series. His chronic back pain, pressure from the fans to keep the manga popular, and perhaps most intriguingly, a mangaka named Akira Toriyama. In 1980, the year after Kinnikuman debuted, Toriyama released his comedy manga Dr. Slump, a series that outperformed Yude Tamago's wrestling manga in popularity polls from 1980 to 1982. Shimada felt, in his own words, threatened by Dr. Slump's sophisticated humor and American comic book influenced art style. Toriyama's manga had a TV anime adaptation greenlit only 1 year after beginning publication, while Kinnikuman took a whopping 4 years. This furthered Shimada's jealousy. That stint of Toriyama's career would end on September 10th, 1984, when Arale left the pages of Jump. And then came along a little manga called Dragon Ball. Perhaps you've heard of it. Dragon Ball made its debut in Shonen Jump about 2 months after Dr. Slump's conclusion, with Chapter 1 being released on November 20th, 1984. To say the adventures of Son Goku took Jump by storm would be an understatement. Kinnikuman went on break due to Shimada's aforementioned back pain, as well as the manga duo working on a spin-off manga starring Ramen Man, or Larman Man if you will. By the time Kinnikuman resumed publication in 1987, Dragon Ball was running circles around Kinnikuman, doing a lot of what the wrestling manga was doing. Enemies becoming friends, big tournaments, and later on, quantifying fighting strength with numbers. 1987 was the era of Dragon Ball, so Kinnikuman tapped out of the Shonen Jump ring that May, and the Ramen Man manga would end publication in Fresh Jump the following year. But what about the anime? The Kinnikuman animated series ended in 1986, ahead of the manga's conclusion. The Ramen Man spin-off received an anime, but the show was only on the air for 8 months in 1988, and tonally was different from Kinnikuman. The main Kinnikuman series would get a follow-up anime starting October 6, 1991 to cover the scramble for the throne arc, now with a more politically correct Rockin Jr. But that was years after the end of the manga, and thus years after the end of M.U.S.C.L E. No Kinnikuman meant no toys and further limited ways for Mattel to keep the line going. But hey, M.U.S.C.L E lived on in spirit. In 1990, Joe Morrison co-created the toy line Monster in My Pocket, which, relax, we're almost there. Monster in My Pocket, which was similar in concept to M.U.S.C.L E as far as collecting monstrous multicolored minifigs made with material that has much of a muchness to M.U.S.C.L's. While this was the end of the M.U.S.C.L E toy line, for now, this was not the end of M.U.S.C.L E as a fandom. Once the internet became available to consumers, fans of the M.U.S.C.L.E toy line began congregating online and compiling information about the series. This began in Usenet news groups where people discussed the hobby of collecting and selling the little pink guys. As the internet's user base grew, so did the presence of M.U.S.C.L.E fanatics, and the first M.U.S.C.L.E fan site went live in 1997, run by a fan named Darren Vindiola, the M.U.S.C.L.E Preservation Society. This website inspired others to make their own websites, and Vindiola claims the online fandom started to feel more like a community when Tim Drage and Patrick Gresham joined with their own sites. People in Yahoo groups and email newsletters bought, sold, and traded figures across the globe, and fans could upload pictures of their collections and even their own video creations that use M.U.S.C.L toys. There were even joke videos using the original anime called Musclekins. This niche fandom became a tight-knit group, even naming and shaming con artists that would rip off fellow M.U.S.C.L collectors. What's more, there was a wealth of information available at everyone's fingertips. Near the beginning, there was little info on who these weird guys were and what the quote-unquote real story was, like this page on Vindiola's website that claims Muscle Man wears a crested helmet, but in the original canon, that's a fin attached to his mask, like Ultraman. With so many hands interested in helping, there were finally names to every face, all taken from the Japanese series, although the claw stuck around. This era is what Vindiola calls the 90s M.U.S.C.L Renaissance. Among these early fans that discovered the online M.U.S.C.L circle was one Jensen Boren, hereon referred to by his online alias, The Org. Org was one of many fans that got into the toys during childhood. Heck, M.U.S.C.L was one of the first things he looked up when he first got internet back in the late 90s. Org would go on to play important parts in the English language Kinnikuman fandom. I reached out to Org while working on this video, and he was a tremendous help filling in blanks and giving further background. At this point, M.U.S.C.L was a distant memory to the general public, so the toys were dirt cheap. Whether from online auctions or retailers that still had piles of them sitting around, the toys were easy to pick up for pennies on the dollar. The cheap price of entry made it easy to jump into collecting. This also made it easy for existing fans to research more about these toys. In fact, this void in the market spawned new bootlegs, many being distributed in gumball machines alongside little figures of series like Godzilla and Fist of the North Star. During this renaissance of the hobby, there was something interesting discovered. There were M.U.S.C.L toys not among the 235 already known. The first one documented and discussed was the unofficially official number 236, Satan Cross. This opened up so many questions. What is this figure? Why is it not on the list? How rare was it? Joe Morrison would shed light on this in his 2011 interview. Per Morrison, M.U.S.C.L was a little ahead of the ballgame in toy collecting, as the line had their own kind of chase figures, or non-poster figures as the fandom calls them, that were never publicized. If a vendor bought enough toys, some packages of M.U.S.C.L guys would have figures not among the regular 235. Again, this was never made public, so to kids, these rare figures were just more funny looking dudes to play with. And this is still not everything discovered about M.U.S.C.L over the years. There were many more discoveries made by M.U.S.C.L buffs years and years after these toys were discontinued, but we'll discuss this later. But what about Kinnikuman itself? Was there any interest in the original series amongst English speakers? Well, back in the 90s, not really. Discussion was pretty much all about M.U.S.C.L and never Kinnikuman. Heck, the first ever mention of Kinnikuman in American media was 1990 in Animag issue 11 on pages 46 and 47. But this appearance was nothing more than a passing mention in an article about Kinnikuman's voice actor, Akira Kamiya. Kinnikuman would see a return in Japan in the form of a sequel manga. 11 years after the first story came to an end, a second story would begin publication. A second generation, in fact. Yes, that's right. I know like 90% of you have been champing at the bit waiting for me to talk about this. It's time to talk about Kinnikuman Nisei, or more famously to folks in the West, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L. Kinnikuman Nisei began publication in April of 1998 in Shueisha's weekly Playboy. No relation to the Playboy you're thinking of, although very much aiming at the same demographic. Amidst the pages of scandalous content was the sequel to Suguru Kinniku's adventures, this time starring his 14-year-old son, yes he's really 14, Mantaro Kinniku, a name that when put in Eastern name order references Ultraman Taro. After the original manga's plot ended, the Kinnikuman universe experienced a 28-year period of peace. But little did anyone know that under the surface there was a growing threat. Groups of devil, brutal, and perfect Chojin teamed up to form the Demon Making Plant, or DMP for short, that is practically begging for a lawsuit from the NWO. This group of evil Chojin emerged and made their base in a rock that looks like a giant fist on Mount Fuji, as one does. Normally, taking down a group like this would be a job for the Justice Chojin, but the boys were all too old to take up the task. Mantaro, though, was a chip off the old block. He had no real interest in fighting, but showed the same kind of potential his dad had. Thanks to his potential, the Legends of Old decided to reopen an old school on planet Kinniku called the Hercules Factory to train up a new bunch of whippersnappers to take up the task of defending Earth. Normally, attendees would train for 4 years, but given the dire circumstances, teachers went turbo mode to train the newbies in 3 months. Over the course of the series, Mantaro goes the distance, transforming himself from HF graduate 0 to hero with a little help from mentors and applying himself. Although much like his pop, he's still perverted and cowardly. Given the series was being published in an adult magazine instead of the young boy-focused Shonen Jump, this series was way cruder than the 80s manga that preceded it. Yeah, Kinnikuman had potty humor and extreme violence, and Nisei has plenty of that, but the sequel also has... God damn it, how do I say this without getting in trouble? Melons, eggplants, and peaches, if you catch my drift. Please, YouTube higher-ups, have mercy. Kinnikuman Nisei received a film on July 14th, 2001, followed by an anime series on January 9th, 2002. This anime adaptation of Nisei had its plot streamlined and R-rated content made more PG. There was still farting and peeing, and Mantaro was still a perv, but there were no melons or eggplants, although still plenty of peaches, and the violence was toned down. With this anime seeming far less offensive than its G1 counterpart, would this finally be Kinnikuman's time to shine properly in America? Well, okay, most of you know the answer. But to those that don't, here's what happened. Enter 4Kids Entertainment, a New York-based licensing company that was riding high off making the gamble of a lifetime with Nintendo on a little RPG series called Pokemon in 1998. 4Kids was the licensing agent for the series outside Asia, as well as the company localizing and dubbing the anime into English, recorded at an off-site studio called Taj Productions. 4Kids was not responsible for the video games or TCG, and even without those, the company made buku bucks off this venture. That said, 4Kids was looking to expand their repertoire of licenses. On January 24th, 2000, the company announced the first round of new licenses, only 2 of which materialized. Then, on January 17th, 2001, the company sent out a press release reiterating the previous announcement that they had licensed Tama and Friends, which we've talked about before, and revealing the acquisition of 2 new series, the 1996 tokusatsu show Ultraman Tiga and, funny enough, a series that parodied Ultraman, the original Kinnikuman anime, being given the name of Kinnikuman Ultimate Muscle for the American market. Back when I did my Tama video, I said this would become the Nisei anime, but no, 4Kids was set on dubbing and broadcasting the 80s Kinnikuman anime. Finally, after being screwed out of one during M.U.S.C.L.E's release, there was a second attempt at bringing this anime to America. This promotional flyer from what seems to be a licensing convention shows what 4Kids was cooking. Right off the bat, 4Kids evidently was completely separating the series from M.U.S.C.L.E, not even name-dropping the M.U.S.C.L E brand or mentioning this muscular superhero spawned a popular 80s toy line. 4Kids planned to adapt, dub, and broadcast 52 episodes of the show in the fall of 2002. The flyer really tried to push the comedy aspect of Kinnikuman over the action, with the headline reading, quote, "It's got plenty of action, lots of laughs, superheroes, pro wrestling, amazing stories, and did we mention lots of laughs? Put it all together in a cartoon and you get the funniest animated adventure ever," unquote. The flyer also points out that, quote, "the way he flies is a real gas," unquote. Also featured on the flyer are examples of some other characters in the show. These guys and the quote-unquote hundreds of other wrestlers in the show, quote, all turn up the action and bring on the laughs, unquote. Again, 4Kids was pushing the comedy of the series, which is totally fair. I mean, have you seen this show? It's funny as hell. With this announcement, the Muscle/Kinnikuman fandom was pressing X to doubt. Even if this materialized, and that's a big if, 4Kids was going to be fighting an uphill battle. And as we all know, this would-be dub of Kinnikuman never came to fruition. Kinnikuman getting Kinniku canned came down to two things: the quote-unquote primitive animation style and, as expected, political correctness. This all said, Kinnikuman was still sitting in the massive shadow of its tiny toy line, but that was gradually changing. Notable Scanlation group Toriyama's World began releasing chapters of the manga in English as early as late 2001. The group was better known for scanlations of manga like Full Metal Alchemist, Bleach, and Hunter x Hunter, but the classic wrestling manga was on their list too. Kinnikuman releases were slow, had poor translation quality, and were skipping chapters reportedly to get to the Seven Devil Chojin saga. But this release was better than nothing, and at least showed some interest in giving this series an English language release, official or not. 4Kids was not down for the count in raising brand awareness of this wacky wrestling series though. Instead of dubbing Kinnikuman Generation 1, 4Kids opted to dub Kinnikuman Generation 2. 4Kids pivoting to a dub of Nisei was announced in February of 2002, only a month after Nisei debuted on Japanese TV. 4Kids would file a trademark on April 18th that year for the new title of Kinnikuman Nisei for Americans, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E, or as the show would be known come time to broadcast, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E, the Kinnikuman Legacy. On paper, this may seem like an iffy idea, grabbing an entry to a long-running series that takes place so far into a story's canon when American audiences to that point hadn't officially received much of, if any, of the original material. Sometimes it works, like with Dragon Ball Z and the Berserk game on Dreamcast. But really, Kinnikuman Nisei does a terrific job establishing character relationships and past events when they become relevant. The characters, usually Meat, give a brief synopsis to the audience so everyone's on the same page, even if they hadn't experienced Kinnikuman before. The other thing is, Nisei follows an entirely new character, instead of following an existing one. Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E came into the picture at a pivotal time in the company's history. 4Kids paid $100 million for 4 years of Saturday morning airtime on Fox beginning September 14th, 2002, which would replace the existing Fox Kids block. Early on, there were plans to keep in line with the Fox Kids brand by calling the brand new block Fox 4Kids. But in the end, the block would be known as the FoxBox. The initial lineup on the block would consist of the aforementioned and ill-fated Ultraman Tiga, the anime tie-in of Nintendo's Kirby series Kirby Right Back Atcha, the I can't believe this wasn't a fever dream I had as a kid fighting Foodons, and the one we're focusing on today, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E. The only non-4Kids show in the initial lineup was a non-canon entry of the Stargate franchise called Stargate Infinity. What's interesting is a press release ahead of the block's debut had a blurb about Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E that describes the first Kinnikuman outing, which raises questions on just how far along plans came for 4Kids' non-existent dub of this anime. The press release also confirmed a brand new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon more faithful to its original comic book vision would join the block, but fans of these heroes in a half shell would have to wait until Q1 of 2003. Ahead of the block's debut, Americans would be given a sneak peek at what's inside the FoxBox during a Friday night primetime special on Fox called, well, What's Inside the FoxBox, hosted by Spy Kids stars Alexa Penavega and Daryl Sabara. Yeah, you know this was the early 2000s when there's a connection to Spy Kids on primetime TV. Here's what the duo was told to say about Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E.
Alright, admit it. Everyone loves wrestling out there. And the FoxBox has the coolest wrestling in the world. Actually, in the universe.
And the star of the show has some pretty amazing powers you'll just have to see to believe. So for ultimate action, ultimate comedy, ultimate adventure, it's Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E.
This special preview gave viewers an idea of what to expect from this American version of a Kinnikuman show, as well as the show itself. The preview gave a synopsis of the plot, a montage of action scenes, and a look at what changes would be made from the Japanese version. Some expected, some controversial. 4Kids also released a Spy Kids List version of this sneak peek on VHS tapes distributed at Toys R Us, one in red and one in blue, the former having the clip of sheep skeletons in the Kirby preview and the latter removing it. This was part of a larger bundle that even had a CD with interactive menus. Then the day finally came, September 14th, 2002. Fox Kids is dead, long live the FoxBox. Because 4Kids had 5 shows to air across 4 hours, 3 shows would air 2 times a day, one of which was Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E. The show graced American TVs at 9:30 and 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time every Saturday. So what is this dub like? The Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E. dub is something akin to a kid-friendly gag dub, although the show sometimes tried to take itself seriously. This dub was not marketed towards hardcore Kinnikuman fans, let alone hardcore anime fans. The dub was marketed to boys aged 7 through 12 watching Saturday morning cartoons. This was the standard for 4Kids even as far back as Pokemon. I know, who'da thunk the company named 4Kids tailored their show for kids? For kids who, for the most part, don't know and don't give a damn if things are changed? The scripts were written to be funny for both kids and, to some extent, their parents. The writers took a lot of creative liberties, and I mean a lot. 4Kids would also insert jokes that eased tension in more dire situations.
It's like I'm being strangled by saltwater tailfish! Cherry or lime?
That said, 4Kids still had boundaries set by the Japanese side, so the writing couldn't go completely off the rails. In fact, Shimada had some involvement with this dub's production. To what extent is not fully known, but his name will pop up a few times when discussing 4Kids' time with this mangaka's co-creation. A lot of folks helped bring Kinnikuman Nisei to English speakers, but we'll only highlight major players, much as it'd be great to give a spot to everyone. Executive producers were the usual bunch, then President and Vice President of 4Kids Entertainment Al Kahn and Tom Kenny respectively, no relation to the SpongeBob voice actor, and then President of 4Kids Productions Norman J. Grossfeld. Grossfeld also served as producer and a member of the adaptation team. When Blue Baron spoke to Kahn at a con in November 2025, Kahn confirmed he was interested in Kinnikuman in general because of existing experience with WWF merchandise licensing. Kinnikuman was also an interesting mix of sports and anime, something Kahn felt was missing from the US market. John Kalish was also a producer and an adaptation team member from episode 7 onwards, early on being promoted to executive producer. There were plenty of people on the adaptation team, but the one that stayed the longest was Matthew Durdek. Durdek even already had knowledge of Kinnikuman as he used to collect muscle toys in the 80s. But what about voice actors? By this point, 4Kids had their own studio and weren't recording at Taj Productions. Actors recorded in a booth alone with the director. The two would watch the scene about to be dubbed to get an idea of what was going on and what the actor would need to do as far as aspects like pacing. Usually they would watch the scene with no audio, but on occasion they would watch the Japanese version to get an idea of things like the intensity. There would be 3 beeps, and where that 4th beep would be is where the actor would begin recording, something still used in dubbing to this day. This dub was produced relatively early in 4Kids' lifespan, so many of the same voice actors did the heavy lifting by playing multiple characters, but the actor doing the heaviest lifting of all may have just been Eric Stewart. Stewart served as the show's ADR director throughout the dub, played numerous characters, and was involved in the back end of the dub's production, providing things like character names and jokes. When I was having help verifying miscredited or uncredited roles, voice actor and 4Kids Flashback co-host Tara Sands got this message from Eric Stewart about Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E. Quote, "With so many random characters, I had to fill in a lot as both director and actor. Crazy show. I think most of the show is me, Wayne Grayson, Maddie Blaustein, Mark Thompson, and Dan Green." Unquote. Early on in the casting process, 4Kids' staff had actors in their talent pool read for every role, some of them being to a character sheet which included a picture, personality traits, how the voice should sound, and so forth. We'll start off with 5 recurring characters, but before we get to that, 2 notes about the voice cast both here and throughout the video. 1. 4Kids did a notoriously bad job at crediting their actors. A 4Kids show's credit sequence would just have all the actors that appeared in one episode lumped together in a list, and then that sequence would be reused for every episode in the series, even if an actor did not appear in that episode. To the best of my knowledge and in good faith, I believe the voice actors I am going over are accurate. I pulled from actors' resumes and websites, various wikis, and some help from the good folks on the 4Kids Flashback Discord server. Shout out to 4Kids Flashback, as I cite that podcast a lot in this video. 2. This dub was produced almost 25 years ago. Many casting choices by directors and voice decisions by actors would absolutely not be done today. The norm of the industry today is to cast characters of certain racial or ethnic backgrounds using actors who share that background. This was not the norm in 2002. Just making that note as we go forward. So, with that out of the way, time to go over 5 recurring characters, their name changes if applicable, and their voice actors. Montaro Kinniku was given a new name. Generally speaking, 4Kids' team changed character names to make them more appealing and memorable to a Western audience, avoid trademark disputes, or make the names easier to trademark. Given Montaro wears the Keen mark, which looked like the letters KM to the producers, the dub sought to keep those initials. Thus, Montaro Kinniku became Kid Muscle, which if one flips Montaro's name to Japanese name order, gives the same initials too. Well, okay, that's his stage name in the dub. When he's spoken to in an official capacity or by his mother, he keeps his given name Mantaro, although early on it's pronounced Mantaro. Furthermore, his family name is Kinnikuman and not simply Kinniku, hence the full title of the show being Ultimate Muscle, the Kinnikuman Legacy. The folks at 4Kids wanted Kid Muscle to have a voice that showed his cowardly and courageous sides while still sounding like they were coming from the same actor. And the one chosen to bring this wrestler a voice was Mark Thompson, who was kind enough to do a phone interview with me to provide some info used throughout this video. Just like Durdek, Thompson has a history with this series too, as he also collected muscle toys as a kid. It wasn't until further down the line that he figured out the toys were connected to the show in which he was starring. Moving on to the son of another legend, Terry the Kid was renamed Terry the Grand Kenyan, and providing this Texan wrestler's voice was Greg Abbey using a southern accent. Abbey also shares the role of Keith in Slayer's Next with Terry's Japanese voice actor Toshiyuki Morikawa. The next 2 next-generation characters are not descendants of legends, first up being the Irish walrus wrestler named C.U.T.I.E. In this dub, he was given the easier-to-say name Wally Tuskett and performed by the late Matty Blaustein. Mr. Tuskett did not keep his Irish heritage in any capacity for this English language adaptation, but that's a topic for a bit later. Last of the main 4 is Tanzanian wrestler Gazelle Man. Now, 4Kids could not use the name Gazelle Man or similar names like the Gazelle due to trademark issues, so Eric Stewart researched animals similar to a gazelle, and he came across one called a Dick Dick. Originally, Eric Stewart pitched the name Dick Dick Van Dyke to Norman Grossfeld as a nod to actor Dick Van Dyke. When Grossfeld heard the name, he told Stewart if they were going to name the character Dick Dick, they may as well go all in and call him Dick Dick Van Dyck. So that's the story of how 4Kids got away with naming a character Dick Dick Van Dyck on Kids TV. And voicing this wrestler was the man who helped name him, Eric Stewart. Oh, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what the writers got away with. Just you wait. And one more main character, this one keeping his name, is Meat Alexandria. In the canon, Meat cryogenically froze himself until he would be needed again to aid the next generation of Justice Chojin to fight off evildoers. That said, he is still just a young boy just like he was before, and in the Japanese version, a woman voices him. Well, again, going back to the dub taking creative liberties, Eric Stewart wanted to give him a gruff, older-sounding voice. Thus, we have the controversial creative choice of Mike Pollock voicing Meat, not to be confused with Pollock's role as Mr. Meat many years later.
How you doing, pal? The name's Meat. It's a long story, so let's not go there.
Shimada was unhappy with this decision, calling Pollock's performance a quote-unquote weird old man voice. But Eric Stewart was happy with the voice, and that's all that mattered. Pollock was not just a voice actor for a character on the show, he also served as an ambassador of sorts to the fandom. He frequented the Kinnikuman.com/LittleRubberGuys forum starting in late 2002 to talk to fans and do some digging on the Japanese versions of Kinnikuman. Pollock would also pass along messages to others at 4Kids from fans, although his sway in anything executive was limited to non-existent as he was just a voice actor, not a higher-up. All this being said, Pollock learns Meat was supposed to be a young boy and was voiced by a woman in Japanese, and he got the message loud and clear that many fans weren't fond of this direction for the character. Over the years, folks online have compared Pollock's Meat voice to the likes of a truck driver, Captain Lou Albano, Rocky's trainer Mickey Goldmill, and Danny DeVito. In truth, Pollock didn't base his voice for Meat on anyone specifically. It's just a gruff voice. He never passed along the memo to Stewart about Meat's Japanese voice, as that, quote, clashed with Stewart's vision, unquote. So he let the director, quote-unquote, hold the reins. Shimada, though, said 4Kids based Meat's voice on Yoda from Star Wars, so who's really to say? Meat also had a catchphrase of sorts, as he sometimes exclaimed, bulging biceps, and variants like blistering biceps, hammering heart valves, and quaking quadriceps. Fans never seemed to mind this aspect of his character, not nearly as much as just the performance itself. The changes 4Kids' team chose to make don't stop with names and voices. There were also terminology changes from character moves to organization names. One big example is that 4Kids did not use the term Chojin at all in early episodes, instead just referring to characters as, more or less, good guys, bad guys, superheroes, and what have you. The dub doesn't utter the term Chojin until much, much later. As for moves, most move names are either retained outright or modified slightly, a few are completely changed, it's a mix. But the most controversial change made to a move's name is one of Kinnikuman's most iconic, if not his most iconic technique, the Kinniku Buster. One may expect 4Kids just to call this the Muscle Buster, but instead 4Kids went with Butt Buster. Don't shake your fist at 4Kids' dub too soon, hardcore Kinnikuman fans, as this name was switched to Kinniku Buster in the following arc, the retconned explanation being Kid renamed the move in honor of his family. Still, Buttbuster gives an idea of the 4Kids team changing the humor in some spots. 4Kids also changed the name of the iconic Kinnikuman series power-up, Burning Inner Strength, the ancestor of cool action manga power-ups. Montaro can tap into this power-up too, but in the dub it's called...
That's it! That's the mark of ultimate muscle!
He said it!
Lastly, the DMP no longer stands for Demon Making Plant, presumably to avoid mentioning demons. Instead, according to the dub, nobody knows what the letters stand for, but all they know for sure is the group stands for Destruction, Mayhem, and Pain. There are many more of what I like to call 4Kids-isms, things not universally changed across their anime dubs. Bear in mind, 4Kids sold their masters to other countries so other teams could dub shows into their own languages. That said, 4Kids tended to scrub shows clean of things out-and-out Japanese to make them more appealing and understandable to a Western audience. In the case of Ultimate Muscle, this meant removing any signs the plot takes place in Japan. So like maps of Japan were removed and or replaced, and Japanese text was painted over unless characters were said to be in a place like Little Tokyo, which happens in the following arc, because let's face it, editing all the Japanese restaurants in this setting was going to be a challenge otherwise. Editing out text also meant any shown on screen to introduce characters, meaning everyone was introduced in the dialogue instead. 4Kids' editing team removing Japanese text also meant any Japanese text on foreheads, so now Meat has a blank forehead. The only exceptions to this are Kinnikuman himself and when Kid Muscle activates Burning Inner Strength. Terry Kenyon's forehead K was one of the few other exceptions. And despite being erased early on, Grandpa Muscle eventually got his forehead text back. Removing Japanese culture extended to food. 4Kids is rather infamous for this thanks to Pokemon, but again, this goes back to making the show accessible for a wider Western demographic. So that meant changing food like okonomiyaki to barbecue pizza. However, there was one Japanese food that simply couldn't be replaced. Montaro inherited his dad's adoration of Japanese beef and rice dishes, but Montaro's dish of choice was karubidon, complete with him having his own song and dance about it. Toei being Toei, almost every instance of this performance's animation was recycled and plays many times over the show's run. The song is animated, lip flaps and all, to the Japanese audio track. Instead of writing a whole new tune and replacing karubidon with, I don't know, beef stew or something, 4Kids' staff kept the melody and dish, but made a new instrumental, wrote new English language lyrics, and referred to karubidon as cow and rice.
It tastes so very good, I don't know how.
Given the animation was recycled every time, Mark Thompson's original recording was recycled too, unless the scene was a unique animation like the song ending early or another character joining. Speaking of music, as is the case with every 4Kids dub save for the Pokemon anime, which kept some of its original soundtrack, the entire Kinnikuman Nisei soundtrack by Chair Watanabe was replaced by a new score composed by John Anger, Joel Doek, John Peterson, Gil Talmy, and the late Ralph Schuckett. The soundtrack being replaced also includes the opening Hustle Muscle by Yogo Kono. Instead, Norman Grossfeld and John Sigler created a brand new opening. The philosophy 4Kids' musicians had when writing an opening was to not write a song as much as a jingle, something memorable and recognizable to get kids running into the living room to park their butts in front of the TV. In my humble opinion, Ultimate Muscle's theme song is the best theme song 4Kids ever made. They cooked with these lyrics.
Heroes join the operation from different planets and different nations. There's an intergalactic federation to monitor the situation. Catch each and every confrontation.
Only broadcast on this station.
It's peak. The credits use an abridged version of the theme song instead of the Japanese version's I no Muscle or Koi no My Chop. Using an instrumental and or abridged version of the theme song for the credits is pretty common across American TV shows and edited anime dubs. 4Kids' team also replaced all episode titles, usually with something bluntly stating what the episode is about or with a pun. Again, this is common across American TV shows. However, Ultimate Muscle was one of those 4Kids shows that, for whatever reason, didn't put the episode title on screen at any point. Weird. Now, there's reason to believe 4Kids didn't receive any kind of master list of characters' bios and personalities, or the team got a list that was subsequently thrown in the shredder, or the Japanese side didn't care, maybe a combination of all these. Many characters had their nationalities changed from their Japanese counterparts or removed altogether, as was the case with Wally Tuskett not being Irish and Dick Van Dyke not being Tanzanian. This was written around in a later scene where Terry is wearing those countries' flags. The dub saying Ireland is where Wally's favorite fish is from, and Tanzania being where Dick saw his first Dick. I'm never gonna get tired of saying that. The only times nationalities were really kept is if it was super apparent from which locations the characters hailed, like Terry still being a Texan. The overall story also saw a substantial change. The dub adds a new element, the Intergalactic Wrestling Federation, an organization parodying the World Wrestling Federation. Coincidentally, the WWF ran the Get the F Out campaign a few months after 4Kids announced Ultimate Muscle and changed its name to World Wrestling Entertainment after disputes with the World Wildlife Fund. Anyways, the story goes that IWF matches are broadcast globally on pay-per-view, and the Universal Chojin Committee, called the Justice Federation in the dub, benefits from ticket and pay-per-view sales. This is one of the most extreme examples of something I like to call dub lore. Story details only in Ultimate Muscle. Most other examples were added just for kicks, like Kid Muscle being allergic to peanuts and previously being a limbo instructor. But this isn't the last time you'll be hearing dub lore substantially changing the plot. With this being a kid-friendly gag dub, 4Kids' scriptwriters added many new jokes and, to go off the trope on TV tropes, a hurricane of puns to the dialogue. Some jokes play off the animation.
You gotta stop running like this, kid!
You're right. I'm not gonna run like this anymore. I'm gonna run like this now!
Some completely reinterpret the context of a scene.
We finally cut the mustard and now we're on a roll.
Yeah, you're all true heroes!
2 heroes on a roll with mustard!
Don't forget, make mine on right.
Some reference pop culture.
Do you see what I see?
Yeah!
It's a Village People workout video.
And some...
Might as well turn to my favorite subject. Geometry.
Would you pipe down? I'm studying some figures in here.
Oh yeah. If you thought the borderline inappropriate content stopped at Dick Van Dyke, you are sorely mistaken. While many 4Kids dubs tried to color in the lines set by Fox standards and practices, it feels like the writers for Ultimate Muscle were trying to see how much they could get away with. The Hercules factory arc alone has a few cut-off swear words, words that sound like swear words, or dialogue that alludes to a swear word.
Once you grappled every goon in the galaxy, busted every bad guy's butt, slammed every son of a...
I get the picture.
Yeah.
Sorry, bud, but I was just letting you use up all your punching energy.
Bolshevik!
How dare you say the F word?
That K on Terry's forehead must stand for kissing.
Hey, why don't you watch your mouth there, kid? If you use profanity, they'll send you packing right off this planet.
Why didn't you say so, you son of a...
And that's not even mentioning other dirty jokes, like Kid Muscle saying he saw his old man dress in his mom's clothes and was wrestled into submission while she dressed as Buffalo Man. What the hell? In addition to S&P, Ultimate Muscle was also subjected to scrutiny by the Federal Communications Commission. Again, this was airing on Saturday morning TV, so the New York-based company had to follow guidelines set by the channel and the US government. With that in mind, how the hell did 4Kids get away with so much in the Ultimate Muscle scripts? Thank Eric Stewart. In his interview on 4Kids Flashback, he disclosed how he got his way with jokes flying on TV. The idea was he'd pitch 3 jokes. The first was extremely inappropriate, so S&P would obviously say no. Then he'd show a boring one and S&P would say it's not funny, and then the one he wanted to use seemed more appropriate than the dirty one and actually funny. Thus, this dub has a lot of jokes that don't even seem like they came from a 4Kids dub. The approver felt like they made the choice. Stewart described this technique as a Jedi mind trick. But that only covers jokes. Ultimate Muscle has a lot of content not okay for TV that had to be changed for the FoxBox. Given this is an action show, 4Kids' editing team had to tone down the smackdowns in Ultimate Muscle. Luckily for the team, there isn't much blood in these brutal bouts, so rotoscoping blood out of the ring was mostly a non-issue. In fact, red marks on characters and clothing were kept, maybe because said red marks were not oozing or anything. However, the low amounts of blood didn't put Ultimate Muscle in the clear for its violence. For instance, the standard rule on kids' TV is that shots of characters getting hit in the head need to be altered, and Ultimate Muscle did this by adding flashes to cover impacts. 4Kids' team also added blur effects for some fierce impact shots and edited the sounds to make some action scenes sound less violent. There were also rare scenes of things like corpses that needed to be rotoscoped out. Even with all these edits though, there's only so much 4Kids' staff could do when there are scenes of characters getting the snot beat out of them, slamming on the mat, or dislocating their legs. Yes, this actually happens, and later in the fight this character's knee gets swollen and it's gross. Alcohol isn't prevalent in Kinnikuman Nisei, but when it does show up, Ultimate Muscle either had it rotoscoped out, said to be a non-alcoholic drink, or had the scene cut out entirely, par for the course. The Kinnikuman series is also known for its potty humor, and American broadcast TV can only put up with so much of that type of humor. This can be seen with Montaro's, well, his gas. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree as Montaro tends to pass gas like his old man. But S&P didn't allow 4Kids' editing team to use quote-unquote realistic farting sounds. The team often used trombones or squeaky sounds as a substitute to a quote-unquote realistic trouser trumpet. What counts as realistic has gotta be subjective, as the lighter cheek squeakers sound kinda real to me, but maybe that's just the magic of what Fox S&P let slide. That's not all the toilet humor Kinnikuman Nisei had to offer though. Montaro has a problem on his other end, as this cowardly wrestler often pisses himself in fear. This was not going to fly on American TV, so pee bursting from Kid Muscle's crotch was either obscured, rotoscoped, or replaced with him farting. For now.
Yo, stop pissing, dog.
Okay.
Kid Muscle also tended to expose his rear end, both accidentally and on purpose. The ass exposures were not meant to last, but are left untouched in early episodes of the dub. Lastly, because American TV allows for less runtime than Japanese TV, scenes were cut here and there in the dub for the sake of time. That wraps up my spiel of what to expect in this analysis moving forward. I'm not going to go over every single change in painstaking detail, there are plenty of other places online that do that, and this video's runtime would be way longer if I did. But I will highlight major changes and an overall look at each arc. Meaning for the first time in a long time, we're doing a hasty plot recap. I'll go over the gist of the story only enough to make the anime still worth watching. So as stated, the story kicks off with the Hercules factory arc, the arc in which Kid Muscle and many other characters are put to the test to see if they're worthy of defending Earth. This arc introduces a bevy of characters, including legends, new generation, and other people both recurring and infrequently seen, if not just making this one-time appearance. There's no better way to kick off the classic G1 characters list than with the original star of the show, Suguru Kinniku, a.k.a. Kinnikuman. To keep in line with the connection between Kid and his father, the eponymous Chojin of the franchise was renamed King Muscle, played by Eric Stewart. Stewart and his Japanese counterpart Toshio Furukawa both also voiced the computer Ox 11 in Gal Force Eternal Story. Now, by this point in the story, Kinnikuman was no longer a buff superhero but a flabby old man, and Stewart voiced King Muscle accordingly. The mother of Kid Muscle and wife of King Muscle, Bibimba, renamed Belinda, was performed by Veronica Taylor, still well known across the land far and wide as the voice of Ash Ketchum, his mom, and many other characters in Pokemon back in the 4Kids days. To round off the Kinniku family members of this arc, the recently dearly departed James Carter Cathcart played Mayumi Kinniku, or Grandpa Muscle as he's called in the dub. Terry's father and my freaking goat Terry Man got to keep his name for the dub and was played by Ted Lewis. Buffalo Man got to keep his name, so no Terry Bull for this adaptation, but he still underwent 2 changes. Firstly, instead of hailing from Spain, Buffalo Man was changed to be Russian. Secondly, for the first arc, Buffalo Man was voiced by David Mu, but starting from episode 6, this Spanish-turned-Russian wrestler was voiced by Dan Green instead. Green shares this role as well as Tombo Tilbity, or Hou Sakuyasai, in Yu-Gi-Oh! Zexal with Kenji Nomura. Buffalo Man was not the only legend to have his nationality changed, as Geronimo went from being Native American to being British. He was renamed Beetlebomb, and Eric Stewart voiced him using a Ringo Starr impression. Get it? Beetle? Stewart and the Japanese voice of Geronimo Mahito Oba also share the role of the narrator in One Piece, Stewart being in the 4Kids dub of course. Robin Mask got to keep his name and was voiced by Dan Green doing a cartoony Scottish-ish accent that almost sounds like an impression of Sean Connery. Another legend voiced by Dan Green was Japanese Chojin Wolfman, whose name was changed to Sosumi, a name that sounds like So-Sumi, possibly a reference to the Apple computer sound of the same name. This name is, in turn, possibly a nod to the legal issues using the name Wolfman, which was also a problem for the original anime in Japan too. Mark Thompson was not only Kid Muscle but also Ramen Man, this Chinese Chojin keeping his name from the Japanese version and not being called Larman Man like the NES game. Amidst these G1 characters is Pentagon, who was not named in the anime but in supplementary dub material has the name Starface. This Chojin was voiced by... who else? Eric Stewart. Last on the list of G1 characters introduced this arc, Harabote Muscle was renamed Vance McMahon, a nod to real-life wrestling manager Vince McMahon, because both McMahon and McMahon are directors of wrestling leagues. However, this is a reference that is certainly, aged. If you know, you know. In any case, Darren Dunstan voiced Vance McMahon in the dub. Now on to new generation wrestlers. We've already gone through the main band of 4, but to go over the others who just kind of F off after this arc, maybe make an appearance here and there at best, I'll make this quick. The Adams became Ski Adams and was voiced by Wayne Grayson. Samu kept his name and was also voiced by Wayne Grayson. Apollo Man became Mercury and was voiced by Darren Dunstan. Canadian Boy became Canuckler and was voiced by Ted Lewis. And Special Man Jr. kept his name and was voiced by Andrew Rannells. Yes, that Andrew Rannells. The one among them worth noting is Gorgeous Man. For those out of the loop, this costume design is pretty offensive as it uses the Confederate battle flag. 4Kids' team recolored the blue stripes to be red to distance the design from its controversial origins. Oh, and Gorgeous Man is voiced by Eric Stewart, who sounds like he's talking through cloth. This is another role he shares with Mahito Oba. Only 2 enemies are named and fought in this arc, the first being Bone Killer, or Blood Killer in the Japanese anime and Adversarius in the dub, voiced by Eric Stewart. Stewart shares this role with the famously hammy Norio Wakamoto, and the 2 also share the roles of Black Shadow in F-Zero GP Legend and Titan in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. The other bad guy in the Hercules Factory arc was masquerading as Special Man Jr., Anaconda, renamed Boaconda in the dub and played by James Carter Cathcart. So this arc wasn't much for villains as the story primarily focused on training and testing. The final test was the Hercules Factory trainees fighting legends. Kid Muscle lucks out and fights his dad, which sees Kid seizing victory by pulling off a Kinniku driver, or muscle driver in the dub. Yeah, no butt driver here, that sounds a little wrong. Then came graduation. In the Japanese version, this is where the winners got assigned to areas of Japan to protect. But because the dub's story doesn't take place in Japan, this was rewritten to be an award ceremony. While everyone else was granted the responsibility of defending whole prefectures or got awards in the dub, Kid Muscle was assigned to where his dear old dad used to live, or in the dub, was given the award of Best Dressed, neither being too prestigious. Either way, in both versions, that's where Kid Muscle and Meat live. Since the show was on twice a day Saturday, the Hercules Factory arc aired its last episode on the FoxBox on September 21st, 2002, only a week after Ultimate Muscle's debut. Out of the gate, the heavy ad campaign paid off, and the FoxBox was off to a strong start. Its debut weekend thoroughly outperformed Fox Kids, although this could be chalked up to American kids curious to see this shiny new block. I can vouch for this as I was one of those kids. The press release 4Kids published the day before this arc wrapped up specifically noted how well the 11 a.m. Kirby and 11:30 a.m. Fighting Foodon's time slots did with the boys 6 through 11 demographic. I can vouch for this too, as I was in that demographic and wanted to see the Kirby show more than anything else on the block. There are no Nielsen ratings available for Ultimate Muscle during this time, but according to Bandai, Ultimate Muscle was a strong combatant in the ring. The DMP arc began its broadcast on the FoxBox the week after the Hercules Factory arc ended. During this arc's broadcast, Ultimate Muscle went from 2 non-consecutive time slots to back-to-back time slots for 1 hour of anime wrestling action every Saturday. As the DMP arc's name implies, this is where the Muscle League begins fighting the DMP in full force, with Kid Muscle and his friend group taking on DMP members across 2 acts. The first act introduces a few new recurring characters. Montoro sets his eyes on Rinko Nikaido, and it's love at first sight. Rinko was renamed Roxanne in Ultimate Muscle and was played by Lisa Ortiz. Ortiz shares the role with Fumiko Orikasa, both of them also sharing Saki Yoshizawa in Boogie Pop Phantom and Charmaine or Anju in Pokemon. Roxanne's friends are introduced too, with Keiko becoming Kiki and being voiced by Carrie Williams, and Tamaki Maekawa becoming Trixie and being voiced by Megan Hollingshead. This arc is also where Nisei introduces 2 characters returning from the G1 days and recurring from here on out. Play-by-play announcer Yoshigai and color commentator Kazuo Nakano, renamed Mac Metaphor and Doc Nakano respectively. And these guys are my favorite part of the dub.
Wait, Doc! I'm getting an urgent message from our producer. He says we shouldn't be holding hands on network TV!
The wrestling match commentary is where the dub shines. The writers had an absolute field day with everything I mentioned about the tone of the script. Puns.
Kid Muscle's not the only one shocked by this sudden turn of events. You gotta hand it to Diabolic and his antenna attack.
Dub lore.
I was nearly impaled by a shattered shard. Fortunately, my toupee is lined with lead.
Jokes for the fun of it.
Splotchy, not spotty. The doctor said give it 2 weeks, and if it doesn't... Wait, what, we're on?
These 2 were already funny in the Japanese version, but the dub turned that up to 11 with the new match commentary. And in truth, Mac debuted in the dub in the beginning, as he can be heard giving the backstory in episode 1, doing the IWF updates at the start of most episodes, and speaking in the opening. As for the voice actors of these colorful commentators, Mac Metaphor was played by Eric Stewart, which is yet another role he shares with Mahito Oba, and Doc Nakano was played by Ted Lewis. Many of you may be familiar with another commentator role Lewis had, as he was the announcer for the English language releases of Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2 on the Nintendo 64, although Lewis plays Nakano with a vaguely northeastern accent. Lewis shares this role with Japanese voice actor Naoki Tatsuta, and the 2 also share the role of S. Goon in Kirby Right Back Atcha, which, as established, was also airing on the FoxBox. As for DMP members of the titular DMP arc, the first act introduces the son of Robin Mask, Kevin Mask. Christopher Calais voiced this British bad boy. As for the quality of the British accent, well, I had one of my British friends listen to it, and he described Kevin's voice as, quote, British, but at the same time not British, unquote. So in other words, it's a New York actor doing his best to sound British. Kevin Mask had 2 cohorts in the ring, the first of which was a sentient cell phone named Telltale Boy. A fine name, but the dub didn't phone it in for the English name pun, as he was rechristened to Diabolic and performed by Eric Stewart doing a Peter Lorre impression with a voice filter that makes him sound like he's talking through a phone. Diabolic can dial up anybody's number, which he can use to create hallucinations or just dial up somebody for kicks. Another telltale sign this is from the early 2000s, there is a reference to Miss Cleo.
Meanwhile, let me put something on speakerphone.
Psychic phone, friends.
What will happen at my match tomorrow?
Oh, sugar, it's so clear. Kid Muscle's going down.
Ah! The psychic phone friends are never wrong about anything.
Kid-facing Diabolic was important for the dub. Remember how Kid Muscle peeing his pants was removed for American TV? Well, that changed this arc. not because the writers wanted to, but because they had to. Being an electronic, Diabolic feared getting wet, which includes urine. So when Kid Muscle pissed himself, the cellular Chojin backed off from the puddle. This was how Kid Muscle put 2 and 2 together and figured out Diabolic's weakness. This change was not a one-time thing for the sake of the story. For the rest of the series, Kid Muscle is seen wetting himself, although there were boundaries the 4Kids writers still had to follow. It's not like Meat was going, "Hey kid, quit pissing your pants, you're getting pissed all over the place!" The characters had to use terms like number 1 or referring to Kid Muscle's bladder. What I wouldn't give to hear the discussion 4Kids had with Fox S&P about how they needed to keep in Kid Muscle pissing. Other characters peeing still had to be edited out. Usually. And I feel a need to point out 4Kids' creativity with changing this oversized cell phone showing 964, which is Goro Awase for painful, to, well, this.
Hey, no cursing in the ring!
All subsequent emoticons were changed to math equations. Again, creative liberties. Anyways, once Kid Muscle ends this call to the ring, he had a call waiting from the next DMP member in line, Maxman, or in the dub, Pumpinator, the 4th character so far played by Dan Green. Pumpinator is a giant transforming shoe Chojin and the grandson of Sneegator, or Shockadile as he's called in the dub, or the Claw as muscle collectors call his true form. After he kicks Wally Tusket's butt, Kid pulls up his bootstraps and gets his act together to take on this footwear of terror. Yet again, we see potty humor be relevant in this fight. This time from the other end as Kid Muscle drops the colorful deuce before getting stepped on by Pumpinator's sneaker form. Pee was fine by S&P, but poop was a step too far. Since these sentient shits weren't designed like, say, Mr. Hanky or anything, the dub called them stink bugs. One of which just so conveniently happened to be hitching a ride on Kid Muscle's costume from Planet Muscle. The characters then go on to say how much of a nuisance it was to step their shoes in, stink bugs. The dub lampshades this by having Doc mention how a pigeon dropped a stink bug on him. After Pumpinator was pooped, the gang didn't fight Kevin Mask as he had a change of heart and resigned from the DMP, although he still refused to join the Muscle League and walked away. Then begins Act 2. Breaking news! 3 members of the DMP are causing chaos in Muscle Stadium. The head of this trio is the Sandy former leader of the Devil Knights and one of the leaders of the DMP, the classic G1 villain Sunshine. The Sandy man keeps his name in the dub, but not his nationality. Sunshine originates from Peru canonically, but this is omitted from the dub. Instead, dub lore states Sunshine lives in Miami, Florida. Get it? Sunshine, living in the Sunshine State? Say, do you think a Florida Chojin would be worse than a Florida man? Well, his American residency aside, Sunshine in the dub was played by my personal favorite regular at 4Kids, in fact my favorite regular in all of New York anime dub talent, J. David Brimmer. Oh, his voice is always a treat to hear. And I want more excuses to talk about him and give him voice actor profiles. That's your cue to leave suggestions in the comments. Coincidentally, he would go on to voice another leader with sand powers a few years later in One Piece voicing Crocodile, infamously.
A desert toilet. A lovely way to describe it, Straw Hat. That makes you Desert Doo-Doo.
The other 2 leaders of the DMP were brutal Chojin leader Chilinman and perfect Chojin leader Shimao, renamed Doomsmane and Skulldozer respectively. Doomsmane was played by none other than Eric Stewart, and Skulldozer was played by Maddie Blaustein. Now let's get into the good stuff. Sunshine's 2 proteges were called Nightmares, hence the NM on the outfits. Luckily, those letters didn't stand for anything problematic. First of the 2 is Rex King, renamed Tyranniclaw for the dub and voiced by Mark Thompson with a low, raspy reptilian voice. Just like Diabolic and Pumpinator, T-Claw had a specific weakness too, ice. This was discovered thanks to Meat spilling ice and Mantaro telling a bad joke. Time for the video's Japanese lesson. When someone tells a lame pun in Japan, a la a dad joke or oyaji gag if you will, listeners subjected to the joke will call it samui, or cold. It's comparable to crickets chirping upon someone telling a bad joke. This cold manifests literally during this wrestling match. So Mantaro, who served as referee as a solid to Sunshine footing the kids' food bill, told a series of lame puns in the Japanese version to begin freezing this dinosaur Chojin. Fans of Pokemon may be familiar with this Japanese word affiliation from the move Chilly Reception in Scarlet and Violet. Now this doesn't translate all that well to English, because if it did, T-Claw would have been frozen episodes ago with how many puns are in Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E scripts. So instead of telling lame jokes, Kid M.U.S.C.L.E started telling insults the characters describe as cold, which is kind of funny because in English they're also referred to as burns. Anyways, same result, T-Claw's weakness to ice is revealed, which results in Terry manipulating the stadium's AC to freeze the stubborn Nightmare solid and make him go extinct. Bravo to the dub team for figuring out a way to make this plot point work. Sunshine's other Nightmare was named Checkmate, voiced by Wayne Grayson. This chess-themed Chojin's Monegasque nationality in the dub was changed to British, and he speaketh in early modern English, aka Shakespearean English or the English used in the King James Bible. There are a few noteworthy aspects of the Kid versus Checkmate bout in the dub. The Japanese version had some references to shogi, a Japanese game similar to chess, but all references to shogi were written around.
I now have the power of funky riding and little ninja guys! I'm new and improved Kid M.U.S.C.L.E!
Talk about Halloween nightmares!
Bouncing off that last comment by me, this episode in the dub takes place on Halloween and is mentioned multiple times in the episode. That's because the first episode of the 4-episode Checkmate fight aired on October 26th, 2002, the Saturday before Halloween. Episode 14 aired the same day but was void of any references to the holiday. Perhaps it's a way of writing around why the fight suddenly didn't take place on Halloween later. Doc noted at the start of episode 16 that there were, quote,
73 continuous hours of combat without a single bathroom break.
And lastly, we've got some new name changes. Sunshine shows a picture of and names several Devil Chojin. Ashura Man became Shivano, Akuma Shogun became Devil General, Black Hole and Atlantis kept their names, and the ninja kept his name for now. Remember that. Checkmate can't feel pain, but the damage still affects his body as Kid M.U.S.C.L.E breaks the chess guy's knee. And one Kinnikuman buster later, it was checkmate for Checkmate. After a semi-touching moment between Sunshine and Checkmate, Sunshine was literally stabbed in the back by the other two leaders of the DMP. However, their evil laughter was short-lived as Sunshine had set up explosives in the DMP base and blew the whole thing up. Sunshine disappeared with Checkmate afterwards.
Gosh, maybe they're taking a bathroom break. I know I've had to go for the past 3 episodes.
So with the DMP defeated 16 episodes in, that's it, right? Well, no, of course not. Even M.E.T. knew that. But before we move on to the next arc, let's check in on how the show was handled on the block itself. Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E was right at home on the FoxBox, and 4Kids even held something called the Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E Ultimate Move Sweepstakes that ran through November 29th. Viewers could send in a postcard of their favorite move to the address listed for a chance to win a $1,000 gift certificate to Toys R Us. Yep, this was the early 2000s alright. Moving on. New arc time! The Hercules Factory First Year Replacement Arc, aka the Generation X arc, in which the M.U.S.C.L.E League looks to replace the lazy Hercules Factory First Years Kid M.U.S.C.L E, Dick, Terry, and Wally, or Team Aho, which is Japanese for idiot, not a-hole, with 4 new promising graduates known as Generation X. The only way the 4 slackers can keep their place in the league is by means of Kinnikuman's bread and butter, a tournament. If Team Aho lost, they'd have to retrain at the Hercules factory, but the dub adds they'd also be reassigned to Uranus.
Oh, not Uranus! That place stinks!
Unsurprisingly, 3 of 4 Aho members got their asses handed to them, so it was up to Kid to pick up the slack and win the tournament. Speaking of asses, before we get to the good stuff, there was a major change to the dub. You see, up to this point, Kid M.U.S.C.L.E was allowed to show his ass on American TV willy-nilly, but that changed starting from this arc. John Kalish received a call from Fox S&P one day and was told they needed to discuss butt cracks. Kalish recounted the phone call on 4Kids Flashback and paraphrased the phone call, with S&P saying, quote, "There's only so much butt crack we're willing to take from Kid M.U.S.C.L.E, unquote. That said, from here on out, Kid M.U.S.C.L.'s derriere was painted over in the dub to look like he was wearing underwear. S&P did not stop the dub team from slipping in more borderline inappropriate jokes this arc, though.
Then Roxanne will marry me, and that night, I'll get lucky when she begs for me.
Roxanne could come and bring her friends too. We'll have a foursome for golf.
How'd you like a 300-pound walrus pounding your prostate? That's what I thought.
Huh?
But enough about butt cracks, foursomes, and prostates. Let's get back to the hasty plot recap. The arc starts with a one-off episode with amusing censorship. This episode reintroduces Kinnikuman's original love interest Marie, who kept her first name in the dub while omitting her last name. She was voiced in the dub by Megan Hollingshead. Turns out, Marie is the adoptive mother of Roxanne, which gives more connection between Kid and his crush since their parents were once a thing. But their touching moment was crushed by a giant lobster Chojin from New Orleans, the Ragani, renamed Cranky Doodle Crawdaddy in the dub and voiced by Eric Stewart using a Cajun accent. This is the second character in the show Stewart shares with Takumi Yamazaki, after Chilinman. Originally, the Ragani set up Rinko to be crucified, but that's not okay for a number of reasons in America. So Mr. Crawdaddy set up Roxanne in a lobster costume. I gotta admit, of all the kooky censorship across all 4Kids dubs, this may very well be the kookiest. One Ultimate Muscle and Kinnikuman Buster later, Cranky Doodle's clock was cleaned. Now we can move on to the tournament. Team Aho had shirts made for them, but since the text is bigger than what was on the Ken Muscle shirts last arc, unfortunately this means the guys are just wearing black shirts. I digress though. Alongside Generation X's introduction came the return of a name we have not seen in a while, Rockin Jr., voiced by Wayne Grayson doing a German accent with dialogue full of German terms and things stereotypically affiliated with Germany like Wiener Schnitzel and apple strudel. Between the end of the original manga and the start of Nisei, Rockin Jr. returned to Germany and developed alcoholism, or as the dub calls it, and I quote, Ziblaz, which also meant removing the alcohol. Eventually, Rockin took in and trained a then recently orphaned kid named Jade, renamed Jaeger in the dub, and no, this is not a typo. 4Kids really spelled his name this way. It bugs me too. Rockin even taught one of his signature techniques to Jade, the Red Rain of Berlin, or the Red Rain of Pain in the dub. Rockin showed tough love and treated Jade almost like a son, which the dub really played into, but okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Ahem. Jaeger proved his might and became a member of Generation X, and Wayne Grayson did double duty doing the voice of another German Chojin. While his Brocken voice uses a pretty regular sounding German accent, for Jaeger he did an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression that sounds pretty rough on the vocal cords. The German Wunderkind in Japanese was voiced by Kenji Nojima, and Grayson also shares the roles of 2 Pokemon characters with him, Delaney or Yasuji in the main series, and young Butler in the movie Jirachi Wishmaker. Mark Thompson also recounts auditioning for Jaeger, but he loves what Grayson did with the character. And the younger version of Jaeger was voiced by Andrew Rannells. As for the rest of Generation X, Russian Chojin Cleon Man was renamed Hydrozoa and voiced by Dan Green with a watery filter applied to his voice in post. Italian mobster Chojin Scarface became Ascara, probably to distance the name from the mobster book and its movie versions of the same name. Mark Thompson provided the voice of this Chojin by doing a gruff New York mobster voice. This voice also carried over to Ascara's true form, because just like any good mobster operation, his unassuming form was only a front for something much more sinister underneath the surface. This one being an alien-like monster named Mars from Gas, Shock, and Awe, the DMP. Last in the lineup, Japanese Chojin Dead Signal was rechristened Road Rage. Road Rage was voiced by Sam Riegel. Now hold your objections to this info, as this was only for episode 18. For the rest of Road Rage's appearances, he was played by Sebastian Arcelus. Yes, that's Sebastian Arcelus. Both actors playing this character had an echoey filter added to their voices. Road Rage also had the Japanese text for stop erased from his, face. Arcelus taking over this role from Regal is funny because this situation also happened with Rex Raptor in Yu-Gi-Oh! Something if I had a nickel. There were a lot of edits made for TV, but this one deserves a round of applause for how minute it is. This unedited scene looks unassuming until you realize this guy's hair is brown in the next scene. Well, 4Kids' team caught this and painted over his hair to fix the animation mistake. Kudos, 4Kids. Kid's fight with Road Rage required a lot of edits, as one trick to beating this sentient set of street signs was to paint signs for him to follow, which starts with left turn only on accident and then becomes things like go slowly, prohibiting the use of certain body parts, and treat me to Carabidon. The dub changed the ones written in Japanese to picture equivalents, which, again, made this easier on foreign language dubs. After Kid put Road Rage under construction permanently, Mars wrapped up Terry in the ring, and Kid learned he was the last hope of his team staying earthbound, the dub went on break for a week, airing a single episode rerun that week instead. Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E returned the following week on December 14th, 2002, where the IWF used a spring break edition of their logo in episode 25 given the setting. Funny given the time of year it was in real life. This and episode 26 made up the Kid vs Hydrazoa fight. The fight ends with Kid using Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E, breaking free of Hydrazoa's body, and using Iroha Hell Tour in response to the Cleon-themed Chojin's XYZ Crash, Iroha being a perfect pangram poem of the kana. The dub script called this move the Alphabet Soup de Loop. Montoro forming Iroha and katakana was changed to English letters Y-O-A, which spells Yoa for Yoa outta here. The writers did the best they could with what they had. I couldn't think of a better way to do that. And after 2 seasons of content, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E went on break and the FoxBox began airing reruns of older episodes starting December 21st. On the other side of the world though, Kinnikuman Nisei had episode 51, its final episode, air on Christmas Day 2002. According to Shimada, while Nisei did well as a manga, it didn't do so hot as an anime. But the story of the Nisei anime doesn't end here, stay tuned. It was around the time Nisei's anime ended too that Kinnikuman made its influence on real-life pro wrestling in the States. The series already sneaked in a bit of its influence in the late 90s with Christopher Daniels' character Curryman being inspired by Curry Cook. But there was something that started hot on the heels of Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E going on break. New Falau Joel Sinoa, aka Samoa Joe, faced Mike Awesome in a singles match at Ring of Honor 2002 using a move Joe called the Muscle Buster. I know this will come as an utter shock, but this move was based on the Kinniku Buster. Other wrestlers had used the move in months prior, but Sinoa popularized the move and became its best known user, becoming one of his finishing moves. He modified the move to put less stress on his tailbone and the opponent's neck by dropping them on their backs instead. Sadly, despite the modifications, the Muscle Buster was infamously responsible for a serious injury. On June 1st, 2015, during a WWE Superstars Dark match, Joe used the move on TJ Wilson, aka Tyson Kidd, and things didn't go as they usually did. After getting slammed, Wilson's spinal cord took a hit so severe it required surgery. Thankfully, despite the odds, Wilson miraculously survived. And while the incident didn't completely paralyze him, his time as a wrestler was over. The Muscle Buster went into a quote-unquote effective retirement too, but Joe did eventually bring the move back in 2022 at AEW. Despite this incident, Wilson and Joe are still on good terms. After all, it was an accident. And Wilson is still active in pro wrestling as a WWE producer. If you like what you've seen so far, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. This video took a ton of work, so a like goes a long way. Leading up to 2003, Bandai America revealed a slew of what die-hard Kinnikuman fans stateside were anxious to learn about. Merchandising, where the real money from the show is made. So let's take a break from the show and talk toys. On November 18th, 2002, Bandai America announced its agreement with 4Kids Entertainment to release various Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E products. Bandai elaborated on these plans in a January 2003 press release ahead of the 100th American International Toy Fair at the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center in New York City the following month. The toy giant revealed 6.5-inch Super Wrestler figures and 1.5-inch Micro Wrestler figures of Kid M.U.S.C.L.E and Kevin M.A.S.C. The Super Wrestler figures had 25 points of articulation, and Micro Wrestlers were fully painted, but much like the Mattel M.U.S.C.L.E line that preceded it, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E Micro Wrestlers had many single-color figures to collect. The press release claiming the number to be quote-unquote more than 100. That same press release also reiterated plans for the series to have a collectible card game, which was the style at the time. Reportedly come December 2002 and January 2003, Micro Wrestlers and the CCG were already on store shelves. Micro Wrestlers came in 15 packs, and over the toy's lifespan, there would be 4 series across each of the 3 waves for a total of 12 series. Each wave introduced at least 60 new sculpts, with a grand total of 186. The packaging had 7 visible, guaranteed figures, 2 fully colored, 1 in gold, and 4 single-color figures, a la classic M.U.S.C.L.E, some of which were recreations of moves and fights from the anime. The other 8 figures were random, with 1 in 4 odds of getting a silver chase figure. packaging also contained a card for the CCG, as the CCG and micro wrestlers were used together. Per Bandai's press release, CCG sets contain, quote, a pack of 10 cards, a playmat, and a hidden micro muscle wrestler, unquote. Terminology and imagery between the CCG and the anime were not consistent though, such as the CCG using the specific term Super Wrestler for Chojin and Gorgeous Man keeping his blue stripes, but that was the least of this game's worries. The real problem was, this game was kinda janky. There were elements there of a good game at bare minimum, but either through a lack of game design know-how or a bad translation, or both, this game was not fun or functional. Org saw the vision though, and took it upon himself months after the CCG's launch to revise the rules to make the game playable based on his game design know-how. If you're at all interested in picking up this game, I highly recommend checking out and using Org's updated rule set. Link is on screen and in the description. Bandai even further elaborated on plans at the American International Toy Fair, as more toys were on the way that autumn, including 40 packs of micro wrestlers, 12-inch super muscle wrestlers that would, quote, speak humorous action phrases, unquote, and various 6.5-inch figures, but more on those later. But wait, there's more! January also saw Bandai confirm the GameCube game Kinnikuman Nisei New Generation vs. Legends would come out in America as Ultimate Muscle Legends vs. New Generation. We'll also go over this and other video games later, especially because this one was recorded in late 2002 and resulted in a few changes between the game and anime. And one final thing, because for the life of me, I can't find anything about this product beyond this tweet by Shimada, there was apparently an Ultimate Muscle t-shirt. Still with me? Great, because it's time to get back into the anime. The FoxBox resumed brand spanking new episodes of Ultimate Muscle on February 8th, 2003, picking up from where they left off by airing episode 27 where Jaeger fights Ascara in a ring made of concrete. Two shows new to the block premiered that same day. The 4Kids produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, Hiron referred to as TMNT03, and the imported 2001 cartoon The Cramp Twins, for which 4Kids had then recently gained exclusivity rights in the US. This resulted in a Saturday schedule shakeup, and Ultimate Muscle went from having back-to-back episodes from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time to having a single episode at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. was not a bad time slot though, considering right after that was TMNT03, a show which quickly proved to be a Nielsen ratings blockbuster for 4Kids. There is just a natural appeal of Ninja Turtles that transcends generational boundaries. During this string of episodes, we see the biggest dub lore drop of quite possibly the entire series, save for the whole IWF thing. In Japanese, through and through, Rockin Jr. was only Jade's trainer, but in the dub, there was a sudden plot twist that Rockin is Jaeger's biological father. Not sure why the team made this change, as the rest of the arc story is more or less the same. Except near the end, there's a minor change. Montoro used a pole to block Scarface's triangle hold, but Kid Muscle misses the target with Ascara.
That's not my leg!
Oh, that's gotta hurt! Mars will be singing the blues in a higher key.
The Gen X arc concluded on March 15th with episode 32, where Kid Muscle debuted the signature move Musclemania, a name kept from the Japanese version, to put an end to the Italian imposter Mars and save Team Aho's butts from a first-class flight to Uranus. With the DMP member in disguise dispatched, all was well again. But you know the series still has more wrestling stories to tell. And I don't just mean the Burning Inner Strength arc, aka the No Respect arc. A press release from Toei on February 25th, 2003 confirmed 26 more episodes of Ultimate Muscle were coming later that year, made with the American market in mind. This news got fans of Ultimate Muscle fired up, just like Kid needed to be in the next arc. As the arc name suggests, the Burning Inner Strength arc relates to Montoro's action shonen power-up, or more specifically, his ability to master it. The Kinniku family puts him to the test to master this inner strength by having him, what else, wrestle to prove his might. His opponents this time aren't members of the DMP, but rather 3 ruthless convicts who will be granted freedom if they can best Montoro in the ring with the win condition of grabbing a lantern. As the other name for this arc suggests, these prisoners are known as No Respect, a parody of No Mercy, but the dub writers had other ideas. This trio of terror was renamed the Gruesome Threesome. Given Ultimate Muscle's track record of dirty jokes, this name was probably used so the team could get away with saying threesome over and over on Saturday morning TV. As usual, the dub pushing the envelope didn't stop at this silly name change.
You started bragging to me about how you were always cheating on Mom at backgammon. Who doesn't like to be hog-tied and shoved in some gargoyle's mouth?
When the rope gets stretched out nice and tight like a G-string on a guitar.
This arc sees a couple G1 characters return. The first of which is Kinnikuman's brother Ataru Kinniku, or as he is called in the dub, Sergeant Muscle or Sergeant Kinnikuman. This muscle-bound military member of the family was voiced by Eric Stewart using a drill sergeant voice. Stewart and the Japanese voice of Ataru, Eiji Takemoto, share a few Yu-Gi-Oh! Roles, Sid or Takaido and, I kid you not, Man A in specifically Episode 3 in Duel Monsters, and Para or Mei in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. The other G1 character introduced was the Ninja, who was previously only shown in a photograph. Well, that name is probably too generic to trademark, so the dub now calls him Ninja Ned. Also, he is not Japanese in the dub, but an American ninja enthusiast. In other words, a filthy weeb. Ted Lewis has the role of this American ninja warrior in Ultimate Muscle. Kid Muscle also meets a new character, Minch, who, spoiler alert, is Meat's long-lost father. Minch is a literal romanization of the Japanese word for mince, like mincemeat, which is ground up meat. But anyways, Darren Dunstan plays him in the English version. The first member of the gruesome threesome looking to out-muscle Kid Muscle was Fork the Giant, a Chojin who's not just forklift certified, he is the forklift. He was renamed Fork Colossus for Ultimate Muscle and voiced by Greg Abbey. Forklift certification did not lead to this convict's victory, and Kid Muscle's next foe was Hanzo of planet IGA. This brutal Chojin kept his name for the dub and was another character for Eric Stewart to add to his lengthy Ultimate Muscle resume. It's during this arc we see a character get, eliminated with no easy way to write around it. Ninja Ned falls to his doom-diddly-oom during his bout with Hanzo. Now, 4Kids couldn't use the dreaded D word or K word, just like how I can't use them on YouTube, so the dialogue says he passed on without saying he passed on and added jokes to lighten the mood a bit. The script uses just about any other phrase or term, like crossed over from the land of the living and spirit world. Before fighting Hanzo after Ned's demise, Kid Muscle even speaks to Neddy's spirit with this non-explanation.
This is gonna sound weird, but are you a ghost?
Not exactly. It's hard to explain. It's a ninja thing.
It's one of those things. 4Kids' team did what they could with what they had while following S&P guidelines. Interestingly though, 4Kids didn't remove the image of Buddha in this scene. After almost getting eliminated himself during the match and having a pep talk from the dearly departed Nedward, Kid Muscle muscled his way back to the match and finished off Hanzo with an ultimate muscle-fueled Muscle Millennium, then grabbing the lantern and saving Hanzo from his demise because Kid's just that kind of guy. Oh, and Chief Wiggum arrests Hanzo.
Take him away, boys.
I didn't edit that in. One of the actors really did do a Chief Wiggum impression. Last of the trio was Bone Cold, renamed Lone Bone Cold for the dub, perhaps to distance the name a bit more from the name's inspiration, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Lone Bone Cold's voice actor was Sean Schemmel. Now that may come as a surprise to those unfamiliar with 4Kids dubs and more familiar with Dragon Ball. For quite a time, Schemmel lived in New York and showed up in 4Kids dubs. During this time, he'd fly out to Texas to voice Goku and any other characters in that series for Funimation, now Crunchyroll, plus the occasional role like in Full Metal Alchemist. This final leg of the arc also sees the return of the classic G1 gag character who showed up way earlier in the Nisei manga but doesn't show up until episode 40, the final episode of the arc, Kinkotsuman, or Skullduggery as he's known in the dub, voiced by Greg Abbey. It's revealed he is the father of Lone Bone Cold, so yet another familial revelation. This final fight of the arc took place in Okinawa originally, but was changed to Tahiti for Ultimate Muscle. To further cultural accessibility, the bony bad guy provided Montoro with a white kimono and headcloth often worn by the departed in Japan, with the dub calling them a hospital gown and surgical mask. The implication being Kid will end up a goner or an emergency room patient respectively, both harsh outcomes. Also, these two girls are said to be Terry's sisters in the dub, which they are not. The fight between Kid and Lone Bone Cold has yet another elimination. In the same arc he's introduced, Mince bites the dust, defeated at the hands of Bone Cold. But in the dub, Minch breaks his hip, although at the end of the arc, the dub dialogue implies Minch is gone. Fans online complained about this change, but many understood, yeah, 4Kids can't say this little Yoda-looking guy went to the other side on kids' TV. The arc's conclusion aired on American TV on May 10th, 2003. Kid Muscle outmaneuvered Lone Bone Cold, tied him in the ropes with a Musclemania, and grabbed the final lantern. Kid Muscle proved to be a master of Ultimate Muscle. So how was Ultimate Muscle doing on TV? Actually pretty well. Nielsen ratings data is scarce, but what's out there shows Ultimate Muscle around that time was performing comparably to TMNT 03. Undoubtedly the #1 show on the FoxBox. This matches the claim that the Kinnikuman sequel was doing better in America than Japan. May and June were huge months for Ultimate Muscle in the West. Firstly, Ultimate Muscle jumped straight into the Poison 6-pack filler arc on May 17th. The Poison 6-pack arc starts by covering the return of the Chojin Crown event. To give a bit of background, the Chojin Crown is a longtime part of the Kinnikuman series. Originally, the event was known as the Chojin Olympics, but likely for the sake of not stepping on the toes of the real-life Olympic Committee, the tradition was renamed the Chojin World Grand Prix in the Kinnikuman Nisei anime and Chojin Crown in the English dub. For simplicity, I'll be referring to the event as the Chojin Crown for the rest of the Ultimate Muscle section. Anyways, as the original name suggests, the Chojin Crown is like the Olympics. Representatives across the world participate in a competition to see who is the best of the best. But instead of humans, they're Chojin. And instead of having a bunch of different teams for a bunch of different events, each country only has up to 2 Chojin representing them. However, after the preliminaries of this revived tradition, the party was crashed by a sextet of Chojin known as, brace yourselves, the Poison 6-pack. The 6 disguised as Kid Muscle imposters kidnap Roxanne and her friends, and our heroes must win the girls back by, what the hell else, wrestling. This time in tag team matches. In the Japanese original, the trio of girls was wearing less clothing. You'll just have to take my word for it. Now this would be the final arc of the anime, but as was reported before, 26 brand new episodes were on the way, adapting the rest of the Chojin Crown arc proper. Furthermore, earlier in the month on May 3rd, 4Kids began the Who's Got the Muscle promotional campaign, a popularity poll to see which wrestler FoxBox viewers liked the best. Commercials saw characters campaigning as to why they should win, a la a political election. The poll ran for about a month, and, surprise surprise, Kid Muscle won. Some fans online believed the poll was rigged, but whether the poll was or not, Kid Muscle declared June 14th Fan Appreciation Day, which is a real thing in the Kinnikuman universe. 100 lucky fans could win a copy of the Nintendo GameCube game. And what a segue! That same month, Ultimate Muscle got a twosome of video games, and I'm not talking about the game on the official website. The first of these video games was a Game Boy Advance game on June 3rd titled Ultimate Muscle, The Kinnikuman Legacy, The Path of the Superhero, quite the mouthful, followed by the GameCube game announced in January on June 5th. The GameCube game was originally slated for April but was pushed back to June, which may have been for the better given how wild this time period turned out to be for the beloved wrestling anime. Both Ultimate Muscle games were rated T for teen. This was before the ESRB introduced E10+, and neither game launched in PAL regions. Given the duo of titles was released in close proximity, both games were advertised together. This magazine ad in particular made me laugh out loud. Some wrestling games are nice, fun to play games. Others will smack that stupid grin right off your pansy little face! Like you have this super edgy text, and then you have Kid Muscle's goofy ass looking face on the right, and Hydrazoa doing a jellyfish drop in the upper right corner. Like, come on. There's some clashing themes here. Then there's this funny ass ad showing a diagram with descriptions written in Comic Sans. Amongst other things, Kid Muscle has an uncluttered cranium with, quote, no unnecessary thoughts which may distract one from performing heroic deeds, unquote, and strong bones because, quote, if you've ever had a 600-pound walrus on you, then you know why, unquote. Oh, and the ad says the Game Boy Advance is for the scenario of, what if you get stuck on a bus in traffic? And the GameCube is simply a chick magnet. You heard it here, folks. Add I own a GameCube to your Tinder profile and you'll have the ladies flooding your inbox. Moving on from ads to the actual games, we'll start with the Game Boy Advance one just to get this one out of the way, and the GBA game was the first of the two to launch. This game has players run through a heavily truncated version of Nisei's plot from the DMP arc through the Burning Inner Strength arc, with the occasional change like Kevin Mask fighting Kid Muscle after Checkmate is eliminated, Kid fighting Jaeger before the gruesome threesome marathon, and the final boss being Sergeant Muscle. Aside from the story mode, there are one-on-one versus and survival gauntlet modes, a 3-on-3 mode, and a training mode, which I'd recommend because I personally wouldn't call this game pick up and play compared to other wrestling games. Path of the Superhero also has link cable functionality compatible with any mode except story mode, although this feature requires 2 copies of the game with no solo kart modes like some other GBA games have. Path of the Superhero has 19 playable characters unlocked from the get-go, from the main band of 4 to many legends and other Chojin seen throughout the story, alongside 4 unlockable characters, Sarge, as well as the young version of Kinnikuman, Buffalo Man, and Ramen Man. Most main character names are consistent with their English dub counterparts, which makes sense considering Matthew Durdek was behind this game's script adaptation. However, there are some differences from the dub, which could be for any number of reasons. For example, after beating Diabolic, there is a cutscene that has Pumpinator talk about his backstory, and instead of being the grandson of Shockadile like in the dub, the character keeps his Japanese name Sneegator, although romanized differently. This is a minor plot point, so I'm not going to hold it against Durdek for missing this. The other changes from the dub are Atoru Kiniku is called Atoru Kinnikuman on the character select screen. There are little to no graphical changes to the rings and characters, meaning Meat keeps his forehead kana, Gorgeous Man keeps his flag colors, and the words Demon Making Plant can be seen on the side of this ring. No Respect, Bone Cold, and the Ninja kept their Japanese names. The game mistakenly says the Ninja is Kokomo student and not the other way around. Kid Muscle uses the signature move named Kiniku Buster like in Japanese, meaning this forewent the butt buster phase of the dub, and Kid Muscle also calls the Kiniku driver by its Japanese name, even being called out in the audio.
Kiniku driver!
Yep, this GBA game has some limited bit-crushed voice acting, with voice actors from the English dub reprising their characters. Eric Stewart even reprised his role as voice director. Path of the Superhero received decent reviews, with its Metascore being 70. Critics generally agreed that the character animations were janky and stiff, with some saying the characters controlled kinda samey. But opinions on the controls were mixed. GameSpot's Frank Provo and Nintendo Power's Blurb review both noted it took time to get the hang of the grappling mechanics. Meanwhile, reviews from IGN's Craig Harris, Gaming Age's Marcus Lai, and GamePro's Evil Star Dingo called the controls intuitive and or simple. Dingo was the only reviewer I saw to bring up the music and sound effects, and to put this bluntly, he said to, quote, play it without the sound on, unquote. Critics also noted the lack of features like Create a Wrestler. And what luck, because 2 days later, the other Ultimate Muscle game hit store shelves. Ultimate Muscle Legends vs. New Generation on GameCube is entirely different from its handheld sibling. Developed by Aki Corporation, a studio known for stellar wrestling titles, this game has damn near everything one would expect from the home console game. Characters with varied movesets, 4-player simultaneous play, tag teams, and even a Create a Wrestler mode. While this mode isn't as robust as some other titles, tell me, do other wrestling games on Generation 6 hardware let you name a special move Great Wall of Ohio? What's more, this game is a damn good Kinnikuman experience. The moves are over the top and flashy, the colors are vibrant, the models reflect how the characters look in the show, and there are even separate story campaigns for different characters. Legends vs. New Generation has 20 characters available, with an additional 10 quote-unquote recruit wrestlers. The dub voices you know and love, or hate, are here, although with far more voice lines than the GBA game. Recording for video games presents its own set of challenges. While actors aren't lip-locked like anime, the team still needed to fit lines within a certain window of time because these games are programmed to the Japanese version, which results in certain lines in the English version sounding ridiculously unreasonably fast. A lot of voice lines in the game, too, are grunts from hitting or getting hit. Oh, and for the completionists, this game has its own in-game King Keshi figures and other collectibles to obtain. We've come a long way from the NES game. Some things never changed though, as the American game still had to grapple with legal issues with music, meaning still no hustle muscle for Americans. Much like Path of the Superhero, there are differences between the game and the dub, but for the GameCube game, this was not only names and terminology, but voices as well. 4Kids recorded this game in late 2002, early on in the series' lifespan. Just like the GBA game, the Ninja and Bone Cold still had their Japanese names by this point in the dub's life, still voiced by Ted Lewis and Sean Schemmel respectively, but Skullduggery was voiced by Wayne Grayson instead of Greg Abbey. There were also characters in this game that, by June 5th, 2003, hadn't shown up yet in the show, namely Warsman, who was voiced by Dan Green. We'll go over who ended up playing him in the dub later. There is someone unusual on the roster though. Amidst the recruit wrestlers is Panda Man. No, not Kinnikuman Panda Man. One Piece Panda Man. In 1998, 1 year after One Piece entered serialization, the manga's author Eiichiro Oda submitted Panda Man for the book Kinnikuman 77 Mysteries, although as far as I know he didn't make the cut. That same year, this mysterious evil Chojin became One Piece's own Where's Waldo. That's what we Americans call Where's Wally. That background being said, this is the only piece of Kinnikuman media in which Oda's Panda Man appears. So you know what that means? After all these years of referencing and comparing things in English version files to One Piece, we are finally doing a voice actor profile for a One Piece character. In this game, Panda Man was voiced by Mike Pollock. Mark this down in the history books of this YouTube series. So how did critics respond to this game? The game sits at a respectable 77 on Metacritic. Praise was obviously far stronger for Legends vs. New Generation than Path of the Superhero. Critics going in, that weren't working for a men's magazine, had high hopes for the GameCube title because of Aki Corporation's name being attached to it. And while this game is in many ways a departure from the developer's previous wrestling games, reviewers still had an all-around enjoyable time. GameSpot even named this their GameCube Game of the Month for June 2003. What's more, Game Informer's January 2004 issue had the top 10 heroes of 2003, and ranked at number 5 was none other than Dick Van Dyke, ranked behind Cosmos of Xenosaga Episode 1 and ahead of Snoop Dogg from True Crime Streets of LA. And for what it's worth, Mark Thompson loved the game too. Even those unfamiliar with the accompanying Ultimate Muscle animation enjoyed the game. In some ways, it's even more fun for people that have no knowledge of the series. I can vouch for this because I had 3 of my longtime high school friends come over to play Legends vs. New Generation for a bit.
Dick Van Dyke? Dick Van Dyke! He's fabulous. What the frick? You're a spin top now. Or what? Beyblade, that's it. Yeah, Beyblade, that's it. Oh god. Ooh, right in the dick.
But I digress. If you're going to pick up an Ultimate Muscle game, seek out this one. Maybe by other means than the secondhand market. The GameCube title was even shown in episode 41 of the actual anime, in Japan. See, between the 1980s and 2003, the FCC cracked down on advertising in children's TV shows. That meant no advertisements in shows for real-life products, which is why the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime dub had to change all its card designs, and stricter requirements on when toy commercials for a show could air. That's why this scene went from Montoro playing the GameCube game to whatever this is. I'm showing a still because this scene has colorful flashing lights, but yeah, it's something probably tossed together in 5 minutes to not piss off the FCC. But to get back on track to the anime, new episodes of Ultimate Muscle would go on break for the summer after episode 45 on June 28th. This was disappointing to fans because one member of the Poison Six-Pack is a buff butt. Tentatively, fans dubbed this rear-end wrestler Buttman, but the name reveal wouldn't be for a few more months. In fact, months earlier, Mike Pollock confirmed he auditioned for, and didn't get, the role of this cheeky chap. The actor also knew the character's dub name and called it quote-unquote descriptive. During the break, listings went up for Ultimate Muscle finally making its debut on home video. While there was mixed information whether this would be only the English dub or a dual language release, outlets later confirmed the release would only have the edited English TV version. The initial release date was set for November 4th that year. Ultimate Muscle was also breaking into international markets, if IMDb is to be believed, and how could IMDb lie with such great trivia like, John Cena almost voicing Kid Muscle. The show's Latin American Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese dubs debuted in August of 2003. These dubs were both based on 4Kids' version, even down to the opening theme. When summer was coming to an end, 4Kids was eager to show off their then upcoming fall lineup. And what better way to promote the set of shows than a crossover special, baby! The special was called The Fight for the FoxBox, and it aired on TV on Sunday, August 31st, 2003 at 7 p.m. Eastern, and also came out on DVD. This was a big ol' crossover of FoxBox shows, with not only existing shows Kirby, TMNT 03, The Cramp Twins, and Ultimate Muscle, but also shows set to debut on the block in September. Shaman King, Cubix, which was previously on Kids WB, Sonic X, which had a special sneak peek 8 days prior, and Funky Cops. The plot of this crossover is thanks to, a mysterious entity, Dr. K, Dr. Eggman, Shredder, King DDD, and the DMP, mainly Diabolic, each gained one part of the FoxBox broadcast code. Their end goal in this scheme was to shut down the block and replace it with a new block glorifying their evil schemes with no heroes able to stop them.
What if your plan is discovered?
Don't be so hard-boiled, Eggman. It ain't like we're gonna go mailing out a whole heap of DVDs telling folks about the whole dang scheme.
As seen in the footage here, the crossover remixed existing footage of FoxBox shows with new voice lines to bring this original plot to life. So as the story goes on, the characters talk about the fall season shows, and during this, Michelangelo confirms he is a fan of Ultimate Muscle.
Hey! What gives? This isn't Ultimate Muscle! I want my Ultimate Muscle!
But that's not all. Part of the story involves Meat talking to both Ace and Jack from Funky Cops. Meat also gave viewers a sneak peek of episodes from the Poison Six-Pack and Chojin Crown arcs.
We're still dealing with a posse called the Poison Six-Pack. And let me tell you, if you think Kid Muscle has a lethal gas attack, you can imagine what a giant butt's got up his sleeve.
In the end, the broadcast code was recovered, and folks at home paying attention could log on to a website to save the FoxBox. Just in time, too, as the following Saturday was the start of the new FoxBox lineup. And Meat didn't just show up in his home series. Allegedly, Meat could be seen on this can of soup in episode 3 of Funky Cops, which was episode 1 in the 4Kids dub. However, most of the 4Kids dub of Funky Cops is lost media, so there's no way to confirm this beyond this forum post. The weekend the FoxBox launched its fall lineup, Ultimate Muscle was moved from its long-standing 10 a.m. time slot to 8:30 right after Cubix. Before we resume talking about the Poison Six-Pack arc, it's worth noting Ultimate Muscle debuted on Toonami UK 2 days after its return to American broadcast TV. No, a UK team didn't make their own dub or air an obscure Canadian one or anything. Although Toonami UK did dub over characters in some commercials.
Busting onto Toonami screens, a brand new show.
It's a Toonami Slam Down brought to you in association with the Intergalactic Wrestling Federation. The gauntlet has been thrown down, so let's get ready to rumble.
The station was airing the 4Kids dub 5 times a week. Keep this in mind. Real quick, speaking of Canada, as far as Info Online says, Ultimate Muscle also aired in Canada on YTV. Back on track to the Poison Six-Pack, the sextet of wrestlers consisted of the following. Baron Maximilian kept his Japanese name, but his voice situation is weird. His final form was voiced by Mark Thompson, but his first 2 forms were voiced by somebody who is, at present, unknown. Tara Sands has asked around to no avail, and many voice actors have confirmed they were not the voice of this version of the Baron. Of course, Eric Stewart is part of the Six-Pack cast, playing a duo of characters in this arc, the Protector, who kept his name, and the Cyborg, renamed Jag-Ed. Stewart, for the latter, did a Sylvester Stallone impression. Dazzle was renamed Dazzling for Ultimate Muscle and was voiced by audio engineer Sean Conrad, who usually doesn't do voice acting. The amphibious Chojin El Kayarun had his nationality changed from Mexican to French and renamed, Mr. French, and, Frog is an ethnic slur for French people, so there's that. Another character for Wayne Grayson's Ultimate Muscle credits. At the rear end of our list is Pooty Pooty Man, not named Buttman for the dub, but instead, Mr. Cheeks, or Monsieur Cheeks if you will. Yes, this is the second character in this arc to become French for the English dub. Canonically, this beefcake hails from Cameroon, a country in which one of the official languages is French. But this is likely a coincidence on the dub's part because the idea of a French talking butt is simply funny. Anyways, the voice actor given the honor of playing this Man of Steel Buns was Christopher Calais, his second shared role in Ultimate Muscle with Ryotaro Okiayu, who also played Kevin Mask. This arc also introduced the son of Harabote Muscle, Ikemen Muscle. Surprisingly, 4Kids kept the name Ikemen, which means handsome in Japanese, hence the exaggerated design, although the dub pronounces it Ikemen. Oliver Wyman voiced this excessively handsome character. The writing team did not slow down on the jokes this late into the series. Somehow the team went the entire series without too many complaints from S&P beyond Kid Muscle's crack. And now there's a character who is a whole ass. Can you tell I'm having fun talking about this guy? Not nearly as much as 4Kids did though.
It's been hard for us Brits to take the French seriously. They're a pain in the neck.
Oh yeah, the writing still has that same style. And we even see a return of a stink bug in this arc.
Go ahead, step on me.
Go flush yourself.
Then kiss me.
Long story short, the boys cracked the six-pack, ending with Kid Muscle pulling off a Muscle Millennium on the Baron.
Ouch!
The girls are saved, Cow and Rice is had, and all is well. Before we head into the Chojin Crown arc, on September 28th, just 2 weeks before the arc's debut, the FoxBox ran promos to announce Monsieur Cheeks would be hosting the Saturday morning block in October. However, on October 18th, the would-be host with the most would not boast the title of FoxBox host due to what the ads claimed was complaints from the censors. Was this really the case though? No, of course not. Mike Pollock all but confirmed on the Little Rubber Guys boards that this was all staged, but Monsieur Cheeks would take over for Mac Metaphor as the recap host in the show proper starting from the episode that day kicking off the Chojin Crown arc. However, it wasn't all sunshine and butt cheeks for the show that autumn. Unfortunately for this longtime staple of Fox's Saturday morning block, Ultimate Muscle's popularity was running out of steam. 2003 to this point seemed to be the year for this wrestling program, but this was not meant to last. To illustrate this, September 13th through October 18th, barring 1 week of unavailable Nielsen ratings and an outlier week, Ultimate Muscle was performing comparably to Funky Cops, which is infamously known for quickly getting pulled from the network due to low ratings. Additionally, the home video release for Ultimate Muscle was delayed to an unspecified date. Worse yet, the new Toys by Bandai is scheduled for autumn 2003, as well as the final wave of Micro Wrestlers and the CCG all had their American releases cancelled, although some reached shelves in Canada. Die-hard fans online were all disappointed, especially about the toys. Could this hotly anticipated arc rebound the ratings? Sorry to say, no. Starting November 22nd, Ultimate Muscle was moved from its 8:30 a.m. slot to 11 a.m., meaning this anime was going head-to-head with Yu-Gi-Oh!, one of Kids WB's most popular shows. This was the final nail in the coffin. The writing was on the wall. Given 4Kids already invested money in commissioning these episodes, I'd imagine they'd still want to air them instead of pulling the straggler show like what happened with Funky Cops. So, this final for realsies this time story arc in the anime kicked off October 18th, resuming from where the Chojin Crown competition left off, right before the final matches. Now, contrary to what seems to be popular belief, this brand new set of episodes was fully produced in Japanese before coming to 4Kids' office in New York, Japanese audio track and all. Mike Pollock on the LRG forums confirmed to fans that the new episodes, quote, looked substantially the same as previous episodes, unquote. However, the Japanese team made this season with 4Kids in mind, meaning there are changes in the base animation like Meat no longer having his forehead text and kanji being removed in parts like Kids Cow and Rice song. There are also claims that the violence was toned down, but I question that given the show's fights were rarely edited too much and the fact 4Kids still had to make edits to bouts in this arc. At any rate, many of these changes saved the editing team at 4Kids time on rotoscoping. Saving time on rotoscoping was one thing, but the 4Kids staff still had a lot on their plate. The team still had to edit scenes such as for time and censorship, plus make English language scripts and voiceover tracks. Part of the set of dub changes with this arc was an updated version of the English opening. The intro still had the same music and lyrics fans knew and loved, but after 51 episodes of wrestling action, the folks at 4Kids swapped out some of the clips used. Not only that, but Eric Stewart also decided to redub his one line as Mac. Over the course of the show, Stewart's performance as this announcer experienced vocal drift. So here's the before and after.
Only broadcast on this station! Only broadcast on this station!
The Chojin Crown content, both pre and post Boys and Six Pack, saw plenty of characters debut. Let's start with Vance McMahon's daughter, Jacqueline McMahon, who catches Kid Muscle's eyes pretty quickly, much to Roxanne's chagrin. Kathleen Delaney provided this sultry sibling of Ikemen a voice. Next up is Chloe, renamed Lord Flash in Ultimate Muscle. This guy, who is definitely not Warsman who changed his nationality to English to train Kevin Mask and be his second, was played by Matty Blaustein. If you recall in the GameCube game, Warsman was played by Dan Green. Assuming Lord Flash really is Warsman. Matty Blaustein also played a second Russian Chojin this arc, Ilyushin, renamed to the much easier to say for Anglophones Comrade Turbinsky. While Dan Green didn't get to play Lord Flash, he did get to play a new character that appeared before the tournament was so rudely interrupted. Japanese Chojin the Noson Man, or the Rural Man, renamed El Nino in Ultimate Muscle and made Mexican. Greg Abbey was back in the show voicing Iraqi Chojin Destruction, respelled Destruction in this dub. Time for a voice actor we haven't seen yet in this video. David Wills voiced an American Chojin aptly named the Matenro, which means the skyscraper, who was renamed Sly Scraper in Ultimate Muscle. The gender-ambiguous photo booth Preclon was renamed Photo Pat, possibly as a nod to the gender-ambiguous character Pat from Saturday Night Live. This Croatian Chojin was played by Megan Hollingshead. As for the script and jokes for this character in the dub, well, it was the 2000s. Darren Dunstan took up the role of Korean Chojin Jimmy-man, named to Jimmy-man in the dub, where his name being mispronounced is a running joke. Wayne Grayson adds to his list of Ultimate Muscle characters in this arc, voicing Brazilian Chojin and DMP member Ricardo. Grayson shares this role with Toshiyuki Morikawa, who both have also voiced Jonochi, or Joey, in Yu-Gi-Oh!, although Morikawa played the character in Season 0 specifically.
Ooh, the Forbidden Season.
Believe it or not, the two also played Eneru in One Piece, since 4Kids cast some voice actors to play Skypiea Saga characters in the One Piece video games Pirates Carnival and Grand Adventure. If you wanted more grace and goodness, he played another character this arc. Well, half a character, I guess, as he was the old man Chojin Jijomon, whose body fused with Nils, voiced by Ted Lewis, to form Barrier Free Man. This nigh copyright infringing block Chojin was originally named Legox in the manga, but was changed to the legally distinct name Blocks for the anime, which the dub uses too. Voicing him was Eric Stewart, because one can never have too much Eric Stewart. Don't think it, don't say it, don't think it, don't say it. Okay, fine. Look, everyone! It's Skibbity Toilet! Ha 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 ha! Isn't that so funny? Alright, but in all seriousness, as serious as one can be when it comes to a toilet wrestler, this guy's name in Japanese is... That can't be right. His name is Wash Ass? Wash Ass? What the... Obviously, there was no way in hell this profane potty name was going to fly on American TV. And it was gonna be hell to even get this past S&P. I mean, Monjiro Cheeks was bad enough. So 4Kids' team rethemed him to be a big shot movie producer and renamed him Hollywood Bull. To add to the humor, his teacher's name went from Bankimon to Mr. P. As of recording, nobody is sure whose mouth was used to voice this potty.
Laugh while you can, sweetheart, because I'm about to flush you down where most of my summer movies are conceived.
Sources online say it's an actor named David Schechter, but given this was based on wild mass guesses years ago, this is doubtful. One voice actor on the show said it might be Sean Schemmel, and I can kind of hear it. Evil Toilet Goku. Ultimate Muscle finished off its 2003 run with episode 60 on December 13th. Then the show, along with all its FoxBox brethren, except Funky Cops, which had a holiday special, and Cubics, which was still airing its backlog of episodes, went on break for the holiday season. FoxBox the following Saturday began airing Ultimate Muscle reruns starting from episode 47. Around this time, Viz Media announced the company had acquired the rights to the Kinnikuman Nisei manga. Just like 4Kids' dub of the anime, the manga would be released as Ultimate Muscle the Kinnikuman Legacy, expected to ship next March and released mid-April. Ahead of its return to TV, Ultimate Muscle finally launched on VHS and DVD with Volume 1, A Legend Reborn, on January 13th, 2004, which had episodes 1 through 4. To further illustrate how poorly the series was doing, Little Rubber Guy's owner Johnny Karras reported sales of the home video sets were, quote, shoddy at best, unquote. I don't even 100% know if the VHS version launched, as I can't find any photos or discussion of it online. I'm just going off product listings, but I wouldn't be surprised if the VHS version never launched. That said, Volume 2, with episodes 5 through 9, was scheduled for February 24th and never launched. All fans got for home video releases for years was just Volume 1. But this isn't the end of the home video story yet. Stay tuned. Home video sales be damned, Ultimate Muscle was ready to rumble on TV again on January 31st, 2004. The same day the FoxBox hosted its inaugural Super Bowl tie-in promotion, the FoxBox Super Brawl, with Super Bowl 38 airing the next day. In this promo event, during commercial breaks, characters from FoxBox shows fought head-to-head in a tournament using repurposed footage to make the characters crossing over look like they're fighting. In this tournament, Team Muscle tussled with and trounced Team Shaman. Team Muscle also faced Team Turtle, but as far as I know, this is currently lost media. FoxBox resumed broadcasting new episodes of Ultimate Muscle once a Saturday like before. After many battles, plot revelations, a scene that had fans online wondering if the dub actually swore this time,
which means expulsion!
And Ikemen McMahon rapping, something Oliver Wyman embarrassingly recalls as on the engineering team was Sean Conrad.
Yo!
The Chojin crown had reached its final round. The 5-episode battle between Kid Muscle and Kevin Mask, starting with episode 73 on April 24th, 2004. This episode had a special guest, real-life ring announcer Lenny Hart. Hart made an appearance to announce this match, voiced by herself in the Japanese version. I saw a claim online saying Hart also voiced herself in the English dub, but upon listening to it, the voice lacked Hart's distinct tone and style, so I decided to make like Monsieur Cheeks and get to the bottom of this. I reached out to Hart on Instagram to ask about this cameo. She assumed she did the voice for both Japanese and English versions, but when I sent her the audio of her appearance in the English dub, she intensely confirmed that was not her voice. I had Tara Sands send the clip to Darren Dunstan, who believes Hart's voice in Ultimate Muscle was provided by Lindsay Warner. Getting back to episodes, this started the final bout was pretty exciting for fans to see, except many of them heard about this episode already. Remember when I said the show was airing in the UK on Toonami? Well, UK viewers got to start this arc on April 4th, 2004. Ultimate Muscle was still airing 5 times a week, while in America the show was still only 1 day a week. So it's here the UK broadcast overtook the American one. Fans online gathered round on forum threads from UK brethren to get spoilers on what happens in upcoming episodes. Japan would start airing the first 13 episodes of the commissioned Chojin Crown content coincidentally 3 days after Brits got to start seeing it. In Japan, this adaptation of the arc went under the name Kinnikuman Nisei Ultimate Muscle, and Japanese fans fucking hated it. For one, again, this was made with an American audience in mind, so Meat's forehead kana was no more. The change made no difference to the casual American audience, but alienated the Japanese viewer base who was far more familiar with the character. The reasons the Japanese side gave for this edit were 1. 4Kids didn't want kids to think they're tattoos, and 2. 4Kids didn't want American kids writing with markers on their foreheads. And this is all a load of stink bugs. Kinnikuman and Terry Kenyon both keep their forehead text, so these sound like excuses to appease Japanese fans. The text edits also extended to things like signs no longer having Japanese writing on them. Yude Tamago lightheartedly acknowledged these visual changes in Manga Volume 25. The other thing was Japanese fans disliked the new opening theme, which was certainly no hustle muscle. What didn't help matters was this anime was airing at 1 in the fucking morning. The original run of the anime aired at 6 p.m. on Wednesdays, so this was a painfully different time slot. Japanese viewers wouldn't get the second half of this arc until January 4th, 2006. Yikes. Back to the States, American fans got to witness the finale of the Kid vs. Kevin showdown on May 22nd, 2004. Americans eager to get spoiled on the finale already knew what to expect. But even those in the know were surprised, partly because the fight ended differently from the manga. In the manga, Kevin Mask was #1 on every Nisei character popularity poll in Japan to that point, whereas poor Mantoro by the time their match happened wasn't even in the top 10. That said, it makes sense the British brawler originally won this match. However, in the anime, the #1 most popular character in America took the crown. That's right, Kid Muscle turned the situation around in their fight and won. While hardcore American fans felt a bit let down at the cheesy ending, the final episode was still loved and felt like an epic last hurrah to a show that was about to be shown the door. Die-hard fans hoped for another batch of episodes to cover the Demon Seed arc, but ultimately, Ultimate Muscle the following week was removed from the lineup and replaced by the menu. If you've never heard of the menu, don't worry because neither had I. With the end of the anime came the end of the Bandai toy line too. Rumors went around in April of additional toys being on the way, but these rumors were proven false. On June 30th, 2004, the final piece of Ultimate Muscle media under 4Kids reached American shores. A localized version of Kinnikuman Generations on PS2 renamed Ultimate Muscle Generations. Except the game wasn't called Ultimate Muscle Generations. The game's official title was Galactic Wrestling featuring Ultimate Muscle. As you can see on the box, Galactic Wrestling is in huge print, while the Ultimate Muscle logo is just kind of there. This title change was present as early as March in Bandai's early E3 announcements too, despite the title screen call still calling it Ultimate Muscle Generations.
Ultimate Muscle Generations!
This point is where it really felt like 4Kids was distancing themselves as far away from Ultimate Muscle as possible once the anime concluded. Anyways, to get into it, Galactic Wrestling is a follow-up to the GameCube game Legends vs. New Generation. Given this was localized so far into the anime's run, the PS2 game's terminology and casting is far more consistent with the dub. So like the ninja is now Ninja Ned, and the in-game dialogue sticks with the dub lore of Brocken Jr. being Jaeger's father. The most notable addition to this game over its GameCube counterpart is its massive roster that has many unique interactions based on the characters' histories.
I'm going to split you in two. Yeah, like you did to my father. Ah!
You must put aside all thoughts of your father. It is stopping you from getting stronger.
Many of these wrestlers were not in Ultimate Muscle, and they all underwent the same treatment as the English version of the anime, getting voice acting and some characters receiving new names. Ah, jeez. Okay, look, this video is already running really long, so we're gonna do a lightning round. To start, Kathleen Delaney served as the announcer in the game's menus and fighter intros. Getting into characters already introduced to Americans that have different forms in the game, Ramen Man's alter ego Mongol Man became Lomain Man, which funny enough is what Toei calls Ramen Man on their official English language website. Ramen Man's disguised Barracuda kept his name. Possessed Buffalo Man became Buffalo Rampage, New Sunshine became Sunshine Supreme, Kinnikuman in his clan battle costume became Commander King Muscle, and Mantoro in his new costume became Chojin Kid. Moving on to other characters, this one showed up in the anime but was never named or voiced. Canadian Man became Manitoban and was voiced by Darren Dunstan, who himself is Canadian. Ashura Man, as established, became Shivano but has a far less offensive voice in the PS2 game, now being played by Eric Stewart with a voice similar to his voice for Starface. Minnesotan Chojin Special Man was in this game too, played by Ted Lewis. This gives us yet another One Piece voice connection, as Lewis shares this role as well as Dalton in One Piece with Special Man's Japanese voice actor Kenichi Ono. Oddly, Akuma Shogun became Rogue Shogun instead of his dumb name Devil General. His pre-evil transformation Goldman became Gold Rogue. Both forms were played by Eric Stewart. The rest of the characters listed here did not appear in Ultimate Muscle at all. Neptune King became Poseidon, and his disguise Big the Budo simply became Big Budo. Both forms played by Darren Dunstan. Neptune Man kept his name, but his alter ego Quirrell Man was renamed Street Scrapper, and both were played by Wayne Grayson. Prince Kamehame became Prince Lu Ao, and his alter ego, the first Kinnikuman Great, became Lord Muscle. In both cases, he was also played by Wayne Grayson, this time using an Australian accent. Oh, and speaking of Kinnikuman Great, the second Kinnikuman Great, who is Terry Man in disguise, is in this game too, named Lord Wrangler in the English version. Black Hole kept his name, but as all one word instead of two words, played by Mark Thompson with a pitched down voice. And just for funsies as one final note, Vance McMahon's bio notes he is from planet Autobote. Whew! Additional changes between the Japanese and American versions are having fewer unlocked characters at the start and replacing any licensed music from the anime. So, still no Hustle Muscle. Galactic Wrestling did not review nearly as well as Legends vs. New Generation, netting a 61 on Metacritic. Critics noted the game releasing way too soon after the GameCube game, with not enough improvements to justify it, noting inferior visuals to the GameCube game's cel-shaded style, longer load times, which is typical of PS2 ports, and the removal of story campaigns and the Create a Wrestler feature. While 4Kids didn't do anything notable with Ultimate Muscle in 2005, the Italian dub of the anime debuted on TV using 4Kids as masters. While Italian dubs often make their own banger openings, the team over there opted to leave the English language opening as is, not even dubbing it. 2006 saw the end of 4Kids doing anything with Ultimate Muscle. By this point, FoxBox had rebranded to 4Kids TV, and this final year for Ultimate Muscle kicked off with Team Muscle returning for Super Brawl 3 Blast from the Past. As the name implies, older 4Kids shows like Funky Cops and Kirby Right Back Atcha were in this event. Team Muscle won their rematch against Team Shaman, then won the championship match against Team Foodons. Ultimate Muscle was back on the air starting June 10th, 2006, as summer filler alongside the Cramp Twins. The New York company began airing UM at its old time slot of 11 AM starting from episode 17, possibly because that's the arc where SMP cracked down on butt cracks. Ratings-wise, Ultimate Muscle was off to a good start, but tanked in the weeks to follow. Not that the ratings meant much, since 4Kids clearly still wanted nothing to do with the show other than popping it into an empty slot. 4Kids also made a 2006 follow-up to their infamous 2005 rendition of the United States National Anthem for the 4th of July using characters across properties they own, most of which were not American, by the way. The 2006 version's visuals are currently lost media, but the audio is available online, and among those singing were Kid Muscle and M.O.T.U.S.C.L.E, played by Mark Thompson and Mike Pollock respectively. How these Star-Spangled covers worked was the actors would sing the entire song in character, then audio engineers would splice the different renditions together as they saw fit. I asked Mark Thompson if he has a recording of this rendition, and unfortunately he does not. Ultimate Muscle was last on the block on August 19th, the week before the big debut of Viva Pinata. 4Kids' license for Ultimate Muscle ultimately expired on August 31st, 2008, with the trademark itself expiring in 2013. Still, the masters were used to make the European, Spanish, and Valencian dubs of the show that debuted in 2009 and 2011 respectively. At a glance, it would seem history repeated itself. Ultimate Muscle was Kinnikuman's second shot at gaining a foothold in American pop culture consciousness, and somehow it had the same results as Muscle. About a year of popularity before circumstances beyond its control led to its end. But seeds being sown over nearly 20 years gave birth to a proper fanbase for Kinnikuman in the English-speaking world. Ultimate Muscle was gone but not forgotten. Kinnikuman had more fans than ever stateside thanks to 4Kids' version of Nisei. Fans still talked about the franchise online, be it Muscle, Ultimate Muscle, or the original series, with all sorts of fan creations from fan art to AMVs to a ROM hack of the NES game that replaced the roster with Nisei characters. You could thank the org and J.A. McM for this one. But saying Ultimate Muscle was gone is only true for the anime. And now we move on from 4Kids' time with Ultimate Muscle to Viz's. The Ultimate Muscle manga was originally slated for a mid-April release and delayed with no explanation. But in July 2004, Viz Media finally released the first volume, first showing up at Anime Expo that year and then in stores soon after. The editor behind this iteration of the series was Jason Thompson, no relation to Mark. To keep in line with the existing material, Viz's version kept most character names coined by 4Kids, so no C.U.T.I.E or Gazelle Man here. They're still Wally Tusket and Dick Dick Van Dick, just like on TV. However, the names seem to be a mishmash of different eras of the 4Kids material. As in Viz's content, the Kinnikuman Buster is the Butt Buster and No Respect is kept the same like in early content, while Bone Cold and the Ninja are named Lone Bone Cold and Ninja Ned like later content. Well, at least the manga has Jaeger's name spelled right. While word went around this release would be uncut, that turned out not to be the case. Remember, this manga was originally published in an adult magazine, so Thompson and the rest of the folks at Viz had to edit the material just enough to nab a T+ rating. But this only applied to the, adult material. The extreme violence went untouched. However, Viz gave up on editing the series like this in 2005 with Volume 8, and really that could be attributed to the series moving away from that kind of content by then. Viz also did some paint edits as far as things like translating Road Rage's stop sign face, but forehead text was kept. Outside of T+ifying the manga and keeping some for kids names, the story and dialogue stayed true to the source. There were no major creative liberties like what was seen in the dub of the anime, although a few things were added here and there for flavor, like Boa Conda hissing in his dialogue. Meat even calls Kid Muscle Jr. to reflect calling Mantaro Nisei in Japanese. Viz released 29 volumes of Ultimate Muscle, covering all 293 chapters of the original run, with the final volume releasing on July 5th, 2011. As of writing, the Ultimate Chojin Tag Tournament manga has not been officially released. In his ANN retrospective, Thompson stated Ultimate Muscle, quote, was some of the most fun he's had as a manga editor, unquote. And I mean, it's Kinnikuman material. Of course it's fun. But what about the original manga? Any shot of that material finally getting an official release in America? Well, no, but Viz did have the rights to the original. However, the company only licensed the release in Spain. During the time of Ultimate Muscle, the old Muscle toy community still had a dedicated scene, not as lively as the 90s Muscle renaissance, but still actively communing on message boards and social media and posting new findings such as color trees and more non-poster figures. Seriously, it's amazing how much info Muscle enthusiasts have tracked down. You could spend hours looking at material about the toys. As time went on though, the 80s nostalgia bug finally bit those who remembered Muscle as children. While custom Muscle figures have existed for decades, there was a new wave of them in the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s being released as products that are clearly based on, if not lovingly parodying, the Little Pink Men, like zillions of mutated bodies infecting everyone, and outlandish minifigure guys by October Toys, Scary Little Ugly Guys by Jack Specific, and my personal favorite, simply unimportant collectible Keshi Little Eyesores by Morgan, the Suck Lord Phillips, and DKE Toys. I mean, how could you go wrong with a trailer that starts like this and features such classy names?
I'm so f***ing bored.
That's right!
Gay Empire! Galactic Jerkbag!
Suck Lord 66!
Necromancer!
Darn!
Another bitch who don't get the bitch.
What's more, Suckle hit the Little Rubber Guy store with an exclusive white color, complete with its own trash can. It's fun to see all these goofy tribute products, but surely someone would want to revive Muscle proper, right? Well, Ohio-based Nostalgic Toys seemed like they tried reviving Muscle as the company filed a trademark for the brand on September 19th, 2013, only to abandon the trademark 11 months later after Interparty's decision. This Interparty's decision may have to do with Mattel not wanting to play ball, as not long before the trademark abandonment, Mattel filed their own trademark for Muscle. But nothing would become of the millions of creatures until the following year, not from Mattel themselves, but a toy company named Super 7. Super 7's slogan is, quote, "No one made what we wanted, so we made it ourselves," unquote. And that's exactly what they did with Muscle. On June 26, 2015, the San Francisco-based toy company announced a crossover between Muscle and Masters of the Universe, or M.O.T.U.S.C.L.E. as the line would be known. This was a mashup of iconic 80s toys, Muscle-style figures based on characters from Masters of the Universe like He-Man and Skeletor. These would make their official debut at San Diego Comic-Con the following month. Unlike their old-school counterparts, M.O.T.U.S.C.L.E. launched with 4 3-packs that had a fixed set of figures inside instead of random ones. There were 12 figures in all, 6 heroes and 6 villains, and packs were available to purchase from both Super 7's booth and the Skeletor Lair pop-up shop at the venue, which also had a limited edition all-black version, limit 1 per customer. Furthermore, Mattel was in on welcoming the return of the brand, as visitors to their booth could get a free exclusive purple Skeletor M.O.T.U.S.C.L.E. figure. But that wasn't all for He-Man and Company becoming tiny collectibles. M.O.T.U.S.C.L.E. would go on to receive 2 more waves of figures in 2016 and 2017. The line received trash can packs with all 12 figures and Skeletor on the lid, and gigantic 24 packs. The figures also came in multiple colors, and as a new addition not done with the 80s toy that inspired it, this toy line had glow-in-the-dark chase figures. Super 7's Muscle line crossed over with many other properties too. Many of these, but not all, also received trash cans and limited edition versions released with certain retailers or at certain events. Each series crossover featured one of the characters doing the body splash pose on the packaging. In the back of the box is even styled like Kinnikuman and Muscleman and Terry Bull talking on the original packaging. The list is as follows: Alien, Aliens, Robotech, yes, specifically Robotech per the packaging, Street Fighter, The Worst, Mega Man, Iron Maiden, Legends of Lucha Libre, WWE Legends, and lastly, Shogun figures, which for some reason were delayed from 2017 all the way to 2019. To compare these toys to their 80s counterparts, of course I picked Mega Man. I'm not going to pass up the chance to talk about Mega Man. I bought all of the Mega Man muscle toys, and I had one duplicate package, so I opened the one that was damaged in transit. The rest I'm keeping sealed. The crossover focused on Mega Man 1, so there are the 6 Robot Masters, Mega Man Standing, Mega Man Firing, Dr. Light, Dr. Wily, Sniper Joe, and a Metal. There was also a 5th pack with the Yellow Devil and the figure of Mega Man Firing, but the color depended on where you got the pack. There were also A-Box exclusive blue figures. At a glance, one could tell these figures try to emulate that muscle look, but putting old school and Super 7 muscle figures side by side, the differences are apparent. The Super 7 figures are a slightly off shade compared to the classic pink. The material is waxier and not as rigidly textured as the Mattel version. The Super 7 toys are also way more flexible than their 80s counterparts. Like, look how far I can bend Electman's limbs. Some Mega Man figures do work with the wrestling ring playset, but getting one on a holder is a tight fit, giving them an advantage over the original figures in joystick jiggling combat. Then again, the Mega Man toys are styled after the official art, meaning they're chunkier than other lines, so. From my understanding, the quality got worse over time, and Mega Man was towards the end of the line of crossovers. When I talked to the org about these toys, he wasn't a fan of the proportions compared to Muscle, as they're slightly off, like the limbs are 20% bigger. In any case, it's cool Super 7 lived up to their slogan and brought back Muscle. But sometime in late 2018 or early 2019, Mattel took back the Muscle license, and in summer 2019, Shadow dropped a Street Sharks Muscle toy set. Yeah, no announcement, just out of nowhere these started popping up in wholesale stores like Five Below and Ollie's Bargain Outlet. They didn't even show up at Toy Fair or SDCC. So that means Mattel started making all sorts of crossover muscle toys of their own, right? Well, in 2024, they released a Mighty Max set of 4 figures, but otherwise, Mattel hasn't released nearly as many sets as Super 7 did. With Mattel taking back the license, Super 7 had to move to making a legally distinct muscle brand called Keshi Surprise, launching in late 2018. Keshi Surprise was a toyland of surprise boxes with one random figure and a foil sticker. Much like before, these crossed over with many recognizable brands. Peanuts, She-Ra Princesses of Power, and later on Evil Horde, Toxic Crusaders, Transformers, Autobots, and Decepticons, Universal Monsters, think The Mummy, The Wolfman, and Bela Lugosi Dracula, and The Worst, which was released classic muscle style, which kinda makes sense seeing as it did get a Super 7 era muscle release. Sadly though, Super 7 during development of this video announced recent US tariffs have deeply affected their business, and the company had to lay off many employees. If you're feeling generous, please hit up their website and buy a toy or two. Super 7 was not the only small company rescuing and reviving old Kinnikuman licenses. I'm sure most of you diehards out there know the name Discotek Media well. What with their countless Lupin the Third home video releases and all the anime and live action properties they rescue and release on Blu-ray. Well, among those announced on their stream on October 24th, 2022 was none other than Ultimate Muscle. Yes, at long last, fans could own the entire series on home video, no longer needing to watch them from old TV recordings. Not only that, but the Blu-ray also had English closed captions and bonus features like commercials from the Who's Got the Muscle contest. And guess what? I've been using the Discotek release of the anime for footage throughout this video. This Blu-ray was originally slated for early 2023, but issues with the Masters pushed the release date back to May that year. Now, it may be odd to look at this cover and see Kid Muscle alongside G1 characters Robin, Mask, and Buffalo Man. I can't find the source for this, but I remember hearing these art assets are what Toei provided the Discotek team to work with, and hey, Shimada thought the box looked cool, so. So how did this revival of Ultimate Muscle do? Well, there are no numbers available, but the Blu-ray charted in the top 12 Blu-ray listings on Amazon and Right Stuff, rest in peace, for a bit. However, Justin Savakis said to not expect a subbed release. Speculation going around says this is due to quote-unquote poor sales, but Toei is notoriously hard to work with, so the lack of a subbed release could be for any number of reasons. Looking at all of the officially released Kinnikuman material available, there are still huge gaps. Most of what we got in the English-speaking world was Nisei stuff, so fans took it upon themselves to make the rest accessible for English speakers. This is the story of how fans translated almost all remaining Kinnikuman anime and manga material into English. Starting with the manga, we already discussed the release of the manga from Toriyama's world, but those releases were low quality and missing chapters, and the site was laid to rest anyways on March 31st, 2006. Enter Stranger Ataru, aka Soldier Ataru, who began his journey of translating the entire Kinnikuman manga on September 4th, 2008 in text format. The problem was, the translations were not the best. As late as February 16th, 2009, a group named Team Kinniku began releasing scanlations of the manga using Ataru's translation as a base. The team consisted of the Org, Tash, KG, Jenny Rogue, Prism Guy, and Nuxichan. The lattermost worked on graphical edits and served as the webmaster for the website. Stranger Ataru was credited as translator, as was Jake Tron, while the rest of the team collaborated as text setters and script editors. Releases were slow but complete, no skipping chapters nor releasing chapters as text files. According to Org, quote, "One of the reasons it was so slow was that we had to figure out what Ataru's translation was," unquote. The team also worked on scanlations of the spin-off parody manga Kinnikuman Lady, a series that to this day doesn't have a complete English translation. Ataru would release his translation of Kinnikuman Chapter 387, the final manga chapter, on March 25th, 2010. Meanwhile, Team Kinniku scanlations came to a halt after their final release on November 17th that same year, ending with Chapter 328. People gradually started disappearing from the project, and Org was too preoccupied with school to devote time to Kinnikuman. With the team dissipating, Team Kinniku passed the project onto another scanlation group starting March 7th, 2011, Shonen Jump 0998. Chapter 329 to 336 were published listing both teams, and from there the project was solely SJ0998. After months of work, the new team finished the scanlation project on January 28th, 2012. Thanks to these passionate fans, the entire Kinnikuman manga is available in English. The anime, though, took a lot longer. The story of getting the Kinnikuman anime translated started, coincidentally, around the same time as the Team Kinniku manga project. On September 7th, 2009, the fan translation group Hokuto no Gun released fansubs of the first episode of the anime, using the team name Hokuto no Gun Musclemania. Now, as the name suggests, the group is known for fan translations of Fists of the North Star material that was never released in English, but the team does work on other projects. Many other projects, one of which was translating volume 37 of the Kinnikuman manga. SJ0998 skipped this volume because it consists of extra chapters, one chapter being outright non-canon. Over the years to follow, HNG released fansubs of movies 1 through 4, a TV special, and even the entirety of the Tatakai Ramen Man anime. However, fansubs of the main anime itself stopped at episode 86, the end of the Golden Mask arc, released on August 11th, 2018. Anyone asking about further episodes on the group's Discord server were met with someone saying it's coming tomorrow, which has become a running joke still used to this day. So then, are English-speaking Kinnikuman fans just SOL? Gotta learn Japanese and watch the Raws? Well, not quite. Enter Psycho no Fansub, a group based out of Spain that produces bilingual fansubs in English and Spanish. On June 1st, 2020, SNF began releasing fansubs of the Scramble for the Throne anime, and on January 10th the following year, released fansubs of episode 87 of the main series, which was the start of the Golden Mask arc. The Scramble for the Throne fansubs would be finished first, with episode 46 dropping on July 9th, 2022. It would still be some time before the main series would have its remaining episodes fansubbed. How much longer? Try March 17th, 2025. Yep, plot twist, it wasn't until a few months ago the 1983 Kinnikuman anime was fully translated into English. All that's missing now is one of the movies. SNF also made fansubs for the first episode of Kinnikuman Nisei and both its movies. Truth be told, there are multiple fansub projects for Nisei that have floated around online for decades, but many of them stalled and or could be better. On February 15th, 2023, SNF member Cavalry 210 confirmed the team put Nisei on hold as they only had subtitle files for the first episode and film. Furthermore, the team wanted to wait to see if Discotek Media would do a subbed release of the anime, which, as established, isn't happening. On June 26, 2023, someone from SNF confirmed they would continue Nisei, quote-unquote, eventually. Maybe they just need time to recover after finishing the original, because I'd imagine they're pretty Kinnikuman'd out. Wait. On September 23rd, 2025, Psycho no Fansub confirmed they are going to fansub Nisei soon. Okay, back to the content I wrote months ago. The sequel to Kinnikuman Nisei covering the Ultimate Chojin tag arc was never licensed or released by Viz, which may have to do with the fact Part 2 is considered its own series. Releases of this part of the story by fans have been sporadic, being translated by Scanlation groups The Machine Guns, Hercules Factory, and Hell's Missionary, with even earlier efforts made by Josukeban. This entire piece of the manga is now fully translated, and yet we're still not quite done. The original Kinnikuman received another sequel in 2011. How this new series affects the canon as far as Nisei is concerned is yet to be known. This could be a multiverse situation where in the Nisei timeline there was an elongated period of peace before the DMP showed up, while in the 2011 timeline peace only lasted about 18 months before the perfect large numbers showed up, which led to, big surprise, a tournament. To date, there isn't an official English release of this manga. So to circle back on an earlier group, Hercules Factory released a scanlation of the first chapter on November 15th, 2015. Hercules Factory has since stepped back, but groups involved in 2011-era manga scanlations include The Machine Guns, Hell's Missionary, Man, Gut for Men, Crunge, and in recent months, Super Friends and Hezi System translations. Woo! It's amazing to see fans come together to bring Kinnikuman content to English-speaking audiences, even if official companies won't. Thus, we enter the latest chapter of the Kinnikuman saga. On March 16th, 2023, the official Kinnikuman Twitter account announced the beloved wrestling series would be receiving a brand new TV anime to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the original animation. A September update confirmed this new anime would cover the perfect origin arc of the 2011 manga, and the animation studio behind this was Production IG. The months to follow saw the release of trailers and info like staff and voice cast members. The familiar faces of the series would receive new voice actors, but some Kinnikuman alumni like Akira Kamiya would voice different characters. The POA anime would debut in Japan on July 7th, 2024. But what about the English-speaking market? Were we going to miss out on another Kinnikuman anime? On the contrary. For once, Anglophones would not need to wait years and years to get a true-to-the-source English-language release, official or otherwise, of a Kinnikuman project. In fact, Americans would be the first ones to experience this extraterrestrial smackdown. Well, at least the ones attending Anime Expo 2024 would. That's right, this anime convention hosted a screening of episodes 0 and 1 on Saturday of the Expo, July 6, 2024, followed by a behind-the-scenes panel with the show's director and producer. And not long before all of that was an autograph session with the director. What's more, there was an entire Kinnikuman Perfect Origin Arc display at the venue. This legacy wrestling franchise's new show would find its home on Netflix internationally, debuting on July 7th, or 8th because time zones are a thing. Yes, this even includes us here in America. Kinnikuman Perfect Origin Arc received a surplus of subtitles across languages, among them being English. The subtitler of this Slamfest was Zensho Yamamoto, who has subbed several other shows seen on Netflix as well. Unlike past official releases of the franchise in English, this one stuck close to the source material. No Buttbuster, Russian Buffalo Man, or anything of the like in this entry. While the subs stay faithful to the original, they do not one-to-one follow fan translations. Namely, instead of using terms like Devil Chojin, the subs keep the Japanese terms like Akuma Chojin. Perfect Origin Arc Season 1 ran for 12 episodes. It would go on to receive a second season that debuted on January 12th, 2025, and has a third season on the way. So did this anime catch on with Americans? Sadly, no. This anime has meh scores on anime aggregate rating sites, and there are several issues holding Perfect Origin Arc back from drawing in an English-speaking audience. 1. English-speaking fans' lack of familiarity with Kinnikuman. Episode 0 is there to serve as a primer, but is more of a serviceable at best refresher for existing fans. The episode goes over iconic fights and how the characters met each other, but glosses over, if not outright skips, many key details and terminology. There is also a lack of brand recognition. Every English language Kinnikuman entry prior to POA has a different title, so the connecting thread between them has mostly gone missing, even though Ultimate Muscle's full title, emphasis on full, has the Kinnikuman legacy in it. This has led to confusion online, with some not knowing if there is any connection between Kinnikuman and the other iterations. I mean, for God's sake, the titular character of the franchise is known by 3 different names in English. 4 if you count Toei officially calling him Mr. Muscleman. None of this would be so bad if English speakers had easy and legal access to the source material and the series had a bigger fan base. Sure, it's easy to say, just read the Scanlations and watch the Fansubs, but not everyone is aware of that option, and even then, it's harder to get a hold of that content compared to hopping on a streaming service or finding it readily with physical media or something. You know how it is online, fan translations can suddenly go poof from a website. It's why I wish there was a Kinnikuman Brotherhood type of thing, a faithful HD adaptation of the original manga, violence and all. A modern retelling could also give characters their modern designs, meaning Brockin Man and Brockin Jr. would be way less offensive. Given there have been several remakes of older manga series in recent years, I don't see this being impossible, but as of now, this doesn't seem to be in the cards. But even without an original series remake, the other weak points could be remedied by a good ad campaign and or word of mouth. It can at least get people aware of the series. Well, about that. 2. Advertising and word of mouth, or lack thereof. Netflix has a spotty history of promoting their anime lineup, meaning if there was no promotion, it'd usually be up to fans and anime outlets to bring awareness to them. Netflix Anime on Twitter made a few tweets about the show across both seasons, but fans called out the company for the poor marketing campaign. Word of mouth was going to be unreliable too, because other shows in the summer 2024 lineup were far more recognizable and discussed, like Oshinoko second season, Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest, and that stupid deer anime. This was even more so the case for winter 2025, with highly anticipated shows like Sakamoto Days, Solo Leveling Season 2, and Peak Fiction Season 2. It felt like Kinnikuman POA didn't have a fighting chance, and it was made worse by the last point. 3. The lack of an English dub. Not everyone is able or willing to read subtitles. A dub would make this show more accessible. Plus, voice actors could drum up hype on social media. In fact, a dub of POA would be a fantastic opportunity to show how far dubbing has come, as in this day and age with so many actors available in the talent pool and an increased respect for characters of different nationalities, dubbing studios can hire actors matching a character's ethnic background, like hire a Chinese actor to voice Ramen Man and a Hispanic actor to voice Buffalo Man. And heck, assuming this hypothetical POA dub would be made by VSI, as is commonly seen with Netflix, a casting director could bring on some reprisals from the Ultimate Muscle days, just like what was done for the dub of the new Shaman King anime. Shows can do well without a dub, but having a dub certainly helps. There were no plans for an English dub in 2024, but after requests from fans online, Shimada said he'll quote-unquote reconsider dubbing this version into English. But while this iteration of the series didn't get an English dub, it will be getting a conversational English language educational textbook. Yes, I'm serious. This is scheduled to be released on November 29th. And thus we enter the last section of the video, the unusual splintered legacy of Kinnikuman among Americans. Kinnikuman does have an English-speaking fanbase, but in the grand scheme of things, said fanbase is niche. The primary Kinnikuman material feels like it's overshadowed by nostalgia for muscle, especially with the collector's market boom during the COVID-19 pandemic, where the price of anything and everything nostalgic shot up in price. M.U.S.C.L.E has taken on a life of its own so much that I think M.U.S.C.L E constitutes its own fandom separate from the series on which it's based. However, even that fandom has changed greatly. Trading is far less common than it used to be online compared to just straight up sales. The base level love of the toy hasn't changed much though. Part of the appeal of the old toys was the open-endedness of them. There were over 200 wacky-ass guys with no names or backstories as far as 80s American kids knew, with a couple exceptions. Heck, Darren Vindiola said as much in a 2021 interview. Quote, "The mystery that used to surround the toy line is what made M.U.S.C.L E so endearing to myself and like-minded collectors. I don't feel the need to know every name and backstory." Unquote. That said, a significant amount of people interested in the toys don't give a damn about the source material beyond having a name on the list to collect. Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E is a fond memory of FoxBox Saturday Morning Glory. As I said, kids that grew up in the early 2000s know it as Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E, not Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E the Kinnikuman legacy. Thus, the Kinnikuman connection goes missing. The anime also isn't one of those shows that's on the forefront of people's minds when they remember the FoxBox like Sonic X or TMNT 03. Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E always feels like, oh yeah, that thing was awesome, I forgot all about it. Mark Thompson mentioned that there is usually 1 or 2 people at every con he attends that bring up Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E, far overshadowed by other roles he's done like Casey Jones and TMNT 03. He said it makes him happy when people bring up Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E because he was proud of his work on that dub. At least Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E is not perceived as a fever dream like Fighting Foodons, so at least people don't think they just dreamed of a show that has a talking butt. Yude Tamago made a comment on the success in volume 29 of the Nisei manga, saying, quote, "If I had to name one way in which Montoro surpassed his father, I'd say it was the remarkable accomplishment of Kinnikuman Nisei making it to the United States." Unquote. Furthermore, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E has a far more positive legacy in America than Nisei does in Japan. Even before the hate for 4Kids died down, Ultimate M.U.S.C.L E was seen as one of the quote-unquote good dubs the company made. Part of that is the target audience's unfamiliarity with Kinnikuman and 4Kids having the freedom to do things like add risque jokes and make the show more culturally accessible. Meanwhile, in Japan, and to hardcore fans, Kinnikuman Nisei is to Kinnikuman what Boruto is to Naruto. Some like it, some hate it, but universally it's considered inferior to the original content. There's a reason Monokuma, dressed as Rockin Jr., says there are no second-generation stories worth remembering while performing the Red Rain of Berlin on the Mono Cubs. All this being said, Kinnikuman is in an odd place in American pop culture. The franchise has a Western fandom, but that fandom is split among several factions among several generations. It doesn't help the main series material wasn't even fully translated until recently, and the translations out there are fan-made. Further putting everything into perspective, in their review of Perfect Origin Arc Season 1, Anime News Network's Kennedy, aka Red Bard, wrote in their opening paragraph they went to a Flow concert, Flow being the band that performed the Perfect Origin Arc Season 1 theme song in collaboration with the anime soundtrack composer Yasuharu Takanashi. But many may know Flow better for... Quote, "At one point, the band asked excitedly, 'Who here likes Kinnikuman?' My partner and I cheered loudly, but given how few cheers I heard relative to everything else that evening, I honestly think there's a chance we might have been the only Kinnikuman fans in the audience that night." Unquote. Kinnikuman even affected the Nintendo Switch game Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Series director Masahiro Sakurai announced on March 26, 2020 that a character from the 2017 Switch game ARMS was coming to Smash. Speculation was rampant, but in the end, the slot went to the ramen bomber Min Min. Sakurai said part of the decision to not use Springman was due to search engine results showing, as the English subs put it, a certain enemy from a certain manga. Many American gamers hear Springman and may think of the Mega Man 7 Robot Master, but in Japanese, Sakurai specifically said the character is a certain Devil Chojin. Yep, he was referring to the Kinnikuman character Springman. The more you know. As things stand, it's not easy for Americans to get into Kinnikuman. Shimada is still holding out hope one day the 1983 Kinnikuman anime will see an official release in the US, but as stated, there are some hurdles to jump, which is, again, why I hope for a full remake. Getting the original material professionally translated and made accessible would increase the likelihood of the fandom flourishing. Not to say a Kinnikuman boom is assured, but it would get the series' name out there more. There's hope one day for more recognition in the English-speaking world, but this series' impact on Japanese pop culture has had a domino effect that's, in turn, affected pop culture on a global scale. This goofy superhero wrestling series has changed media as we know it. All this because a couple of high schoolers wanted to make an Ultraman parody. If you want to experience Kinnikuman for yourself, well, you're gonna be stuck consuming fan content, meaning you'll have to sail the high seas, or, in the case of Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E, look on the second-hand market for the Blu-ray if you really want to own the series physically. And there are 3 video games released connected to that iteration of the franchise. There is a bootleg home video release out there, but you're better off with the sure thing. The Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E manga went out of print years ago and is incredibly expensive on the second-hand market. So again, you may be best off looking elsewhere. As for muscle collecting, there's no better place to start than online storefronts. There are a bevy of collector's guides online like Nathan's Muscle Blog and University of Muscle. Stay tuned as I will be announcing the next episode of English Version Files. Shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon and Twitch, and a special shout out to my masked muchacho tier patron Coops. If you'd like your name here, gain access to my exclusive Discord server, and receive exclusive updates, please consider supporting on either platform. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment what you think of Kinnikuman, how you found the series, and anything else you'd like me to cover in the future. Special thanks go to my research assistants Blue Baron and Xavier Ginger Pizza, who helped me parse through Ultimate M.U.S.C.L.E and the Perfect Origin arc respectively. And especially Blue Baron's practically encyclopedic knowledge of 4Kids dubs in general. Check out Blue Baron's channel for info about lost media. Also a special thank you to Org, who was immensely helpful filling in blanks in my research and clarifying info. He also reviewed the script. Another special thank you goes to the voice of Kid Muscle himself, Mark Thompson, who was kind enough to do a phone interview, as I mentioned. Check out his social media on screen now. And thank you to my longtime fans for being patient with this one. This ended up taking more time and being longer than my Parappa the Rapper video, so I hope this was worth the wait. Next time, I promise will be nowhere near as long and detailed as there isn't as much to discuss, but I'm looking forward to seeing what people think of this topic. Other stuff, thank you to folks that found the channel from the Parappa video. The Parappa fandom has been unbelievably sweet. Like, definitely the best fandom I've had the pleasure of coming in contact with. If you're all ambassadors for the fandom, you're doing an excellent job. And remember that I stream at least once a month on YouTube, so if you want to chat with me directly, feel free to stop by. But enough chatter, the credits have rolled, it's time to see what's next on English Version Files. Here's what's coming up.
The intersection between two worlds, Hail Salem's Lot. Libra, a secret society of superhumans toiling in the shadows to preserve the fractured balance between worlds. These are the records of our covert missions.
If you want to watch more of my videos, check out this one. YouTube thinks you'll like it, and you probably will. Until next time, take care.